Okay, we have 6 o'clock. I'd like to call the March 1st, 2022 Village Board meeting to order. Jamie, will you lead us in the pledge?
Certainly. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, please, Allison.
Do you want this to be on?
No. Okay.
All right. Trustee Webb.
Here.
Trustee Walter.
Here.
Trustee Shawes. Trustee Lundy.
Here.
Trustee Harris. Trustee Bond.
Here.
President Cohen.
Here. We do have 5 of us here. We do have a quorum. Under public hearing this evening, we have the 4th Amendment to the Hanford Farm Annexation Agreement. I'd like to open the public hearing at this time. Walter?
Just a couple brief comments. The purpose of the public hearing is to accept comments from the public concerning the proposed amendment. The proposed amendment is essentially the final accounting for the public improvements and other incomplete improvements in the subdivision. I think that describes it all.
Okay. Thank you. Do we have any public comments at this time under the public hearing for the amendment for the annexation agreement? Just note to the public that we have a 3-minute clock today for any public comment.
It's our understanding that...
Can you, would you make somebody just standing up? That's
Sure.
fine.
I'm Lisa Bilski, I'm a resident of Hanford Farm. And my public comment is more of a question just to confirm that funds from the filing fee are going to be capped at $12,500 for subdivision expenses. Is that, do I have a correct understanding of that, or no?
Well, yes and no, though. It's not for subdivision expenses.
Correct.
It is for the expense relative to the dirt pile, where the dirt pile was located, and restoration to the prairie grass on that parcel. So, as you'll see in the board packet tonight, there's 2 items up for vote. One item is the annexation agreement after the amendment, after the public hearing, and the other item is for basically the contract to J&S for the grading of that parcel. And so that's the board will have to decide that's a roughly $52,000 expense that the village will front load, pay in advance, and then get reimbursed through the filing fee.
Okay.
So the 12.5 is meant, it's not like an unlimited bucket slush fund for the HOA. God willing, we wish it would be, but it's not. It's really for that particular area and the restoration in that area.
Okay. Okay, that clears it up.
Okay. Do you want to add to that?
No, I was going to wait for the public comment. If Trustee
Okay.
Shawes is on.
Are there any other public comments on relative to the annexation agreement amendment? Hearing none, we will close that portion. Trustee Shulman, are you with us? Oh.
No, I'm here. Sorry.
That's okay, thank you. If there's no, what am I trying to say? Objections, thank you very much. To Trustee Shomas being on the call, he is homesick. It is a qualifier for him to dial in. If there's no objections. Allison, will you add Trustee Shomas to our roll call? Okay. Under appointments and presentations this evening, we have the Plan Commission. They're all reappointments. Plan Commission, Police Commission, and Police Pension Board. So the names that were sent in your packet were Joshua Salisbury to the Police Commission, term ending in May of 2025. John Hutendorf to the Plan Commission, term ending in May of 27. And Kate Bannock to the Police Pension Board, term ending May 24th. Just, are there any discussion on these appointments? No? Hearing none, can I get a motion to approve the appointments as previously stated?
I make the motion.
Second.
Thank you. First out, Trustee Lundy, and a second out, Trustee Walter. Roll call, please, Allison.
Trustee Lundy. Trustee Walter.
Aye.
Trustee Bonnie. Trustee White?
Aye.
Trustee Shomers?
Motion passes. Thank you. Airport report, Joe.
Thank you.
Steve, the airport manager, called me yesterday, probably on the phone, and we had a conversation. I called Amy about a week ago and asked if, he was around. He was in Texas, so I said, it's faster if you have him call me and see if he'd like to attend one of our board meetings and give a report. So he called yesterday and said he would love to come and give a report, but he can't. He's not allowed to. The mayor won't allow him to. So, but we did talk about other things. That issue on the development, the plans went down to Springfield. He said that's A-OK. You know which one I'm talking about.
Legacy down to Springfield. Flying?
The one's just east of the airport.
Prairie Grove Commons, the potential industrial development.
Yeah.
With the height of the buildings,
Yeah.
using cranes.
Oh, sorry.
Yep. He said that on Springfield, okay. Springfield, okay. FAA, okay.
They already asked permission of the FAA?
Pardon?
They already asked the FAA?
Yeah, I believe so. He said everything is okay to go.
That was from Steve?
Steve,
Steve said that.
airport manager.
I know who he is. I'm just saying that's who you're saying said that to you.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, he talked a little bit about the airport, that he has no, he is not allowed to communicate with any of the businesses on the airport. There were some businesses that wanted to come in and develop on the micro-M, the old Honda place, and the mayor told him not to discuss it with anyone. So he did not discuss it with people that want to go there. He said that, I asked him about I said, how's the relationship between Chicago and Mirzo? He says, good. He says, there's no problem. But he is not allowed to talk to anybody about it, about anything, except maybe me.
We got boots on the ground.
I'm not sure why. But anyhow, he hasn't talked to Courier in a couple months. Last fall he was talking to him the other day, and he no longer talks to them. So he did talk a little bit about the problems. There's two problems. The one is the suit involving, I'm not sure how it is, but the FAA suit is about to be wrapped up. JA Air is still fighting, but he thinks that problem will be resolved, and the money that will start flowing from the FAA. The suit between JA and the airport, or the suit judge refused to even meet with them because they're too far apart to resolve anything. Everything at the airport that they do, or don't do, or can't do, is involved in the suit. Steve says he has to be careful of what he puts in writing, because he was called into court on this suit. So, nothing to be done. So, it's, I asked him if I could continue to talk to Amy, and he said yes. And I said, can I continue to call you? And he says, yes, you have my phone number, call me anytime. But I don't know what we're going to talk about. We do talk about the airport. But I think, like you could not talk about the airport because you couldn't talk about water, sewer. But you wouldn't talk about the airport because of the suit. And whenever I talk to Amy, what's going on? And he said, well, the suit is running everything. And I have no idea what the suit is. And I don't ask because I'd rather not know. Because, you know, it's one of those things. But it's at a point where he would like the airport advisory board to be established, and he thinks it has value and it will have value. He doesn't think that's going to be established as long as the suit is going on. So, you know, if you want to make some changes, or I don't know how valuable I'm going to be, I can talk, you know, find out what I can find out. But if you want to go in a different direction, it might be time to go in a different direction. I don't know. I'm not sure where this is. I don't know. The suit could hang on for a couple of years. I have no idea. But it affects everything, and nothing's going to happen. Last time I talked to Amy, I said, well, if we had a meeting, what would we talk about? Well, we could talk about the parking lot needs repair. So I'm just saying, you know, I'm giving you an out.
No, how about we do this? I'll talk to you outside of the boardroom. We'll have a conversation, and then maybe we can reach out to Aurora and see if we just can get
anything probably would go to the mayor's office from you.
Yeah. That's fine. We'll do that. It's time. You've spent a lot of time and a lot of conversations with them at the airport. So let's just see if we can have a conversation about what's going on. And
you want me to continue to talk to the airport?
Yeah, I mean, you're our insight to the airport. Sometimes there's no update, sometimes there is, but you're a good source for us. So unless you're looking for an out, you better let me know that. But okay, yeah, no, there's definite value there, Joe, and you have history, which is so valuable, and you know what's coming, and so we appreciate that. And I told you that spot is yours, and you know you're going to have to relinquish when you're ready.
Well, I've never been fired.
I will open up with you, unemployment.
That, you know, first time for everything, you know.
I'm telling you, there's not much potential.
I gave her an out.
You tried.
I tried my best.
Well, we appreciate that, and like I said, I think it's time just for us to reach out to them and have a conversation. That's
Yeah.
And we'll see where it goes. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, we have public comment on items scheduled for, I'm sorry, folks. Does anybody have any questions for Joe? You know, it's not necessarily any new item. Okay, we'll move on. Thank you, Joe. We have public comment on items scheduled for action. On this evening's consent agenda, we have A, approval of the minutes of the February 15th, 2022 village board meeting. B, approval of the vouchers. C, approval of the purchase of chairs for the police department. D, a resolution approving a maintenance agreement for the Mallard Point wetland. E, a resolution approving a maintenance agreement for the Sugar Grove Center Lot number 14 natural area. Also, under general business, we have an ordinance approving the Fourth Amendment to the Hanford Farm Annexation Agreement, and B, a resolution approving Hanford Farm topsoil site final grading. Are there any public comments for any of the items I just listed? Okay, hearing none, we will close that portion. Under the consent agenda, are there any board members that would like to remove any items from consent? Okay, hearing none, can I get a motion to approve consent as previously stated?
So moved.
Second, thank you. First on trustee White, the second on trustee Walter. Roll call please, Allison.
Trustee White?
Aye.
Trustee Walter?
Aye.
Trustee Shomas?
Aye.
Trustee Bonnie?
Aye.
Trustee Lynn?
Thank you, motion passes. Okay, up next, Heidi I'll preside over, but I'm going to abstain from the vote on these items. So under general business, we have an ordinance approving the Fourth Amendment to the Hanford Farm Annexation Agreement. Walter.
At long last, the Fourth Amendment to the Annexation Agreement. As I said in the comments of the public hearing, this is kind of the final accounting for the incomplete public improvements in the subdivision. The new developer has completed all of those, so we present to you the final resolution of the cost and how the reimbursement is going to be handled.
Thank you, Walter. Any board members have questions or comments for staff on the ordinance? No? Okay. Hearing none, can I get a motion to approve the ordinance amendment for the Fourth Amendment to the Hanford Farm Annexation Agreement?
Yes,
And the first on trustee Bonnie,
second.
and a second on trustee Walter. Roll call please, Allison.
Trustee Bonnie?
Aye.
Trustee Walter?
Aye.
Trustee Lindy? Trustee White?
Aye.
Trustee Shomas?
Aye.
And I'm abstaining, so the motion passes. Thank you all. On the resolution approving the Hanford Farm topsoil site final grading, Walter.
No.
Who's doing the final grading? Oh God, Tony. Brad, really? He's handled the project, so we should probably go.
Big Brad's project.
It is.
Basically, you asked us to get a, proposal on doing it, and reached out to J&S, local contractors, and we worked with them on numerous projects. In fact, you may or may not know they did most of the punch work out there too, so, I'm comfortable with them being dislocated in the subdivision, they'll do a nice job. In a timely manner.
Excellent.
We've already reached out to them to make sure that it fits their schedule and everything like that.
And what is their schedule?
As soon as we can get out there.
As soon as it gets approved, and you
Just
can
trying,
go.
yeah, so I want to get it approved tonight so we can say, hey, whatever, it's ready.
Okay.
And Brad, I understand that the HOA has a contract pending with NCAP to take over for the seeding, if you will, and that you've talked to both J&S and NCAP, so they both understand what the condition will be when J&S leaves and NCAP enters, so there's no, hey, I didn't think this is what I was getting, type of thing. So everybody's on the same page.
Yes. Another side, when I reached
fertilize, seed
Our
grass,
excess
just grass
crop, we
seed
use
for that.
Just grass seed.
Yeah.
Yep, we'll take care of that.
Okay.
And the only other thing to mention is that the recommendation as stated, we're looking for waiving the competitive bid process because of the price would normally require competitive bidding, but because of the nature of the work and staff's long history of successful projects with JNS in this type of time and material work, we recommend that we waive and go with JNS.
Okay, does the board ever have any issue with that?
I have a question, and this is probably for my education, silt fencing, that's a requirement for? Okay. I mean, it's such a large amount, it's so temporary, not like,
Yeah, but they have to surround the side as a grade that for runoff in King County, so far. I know.
But isn't there already silt fence out there?
just for where they did.
Partial sections, but it
Okay.
needs to be the whole area where we're grass.
It's just kind of silly, because it's all open land, nothing's gonna happen.
I agree.
All right.
Similar to the golden house built.
Any other questions? Excellent. All right, can I get a motion to approve the resolution, approving the Hanford Farm topsoil site final agreement?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Heidi. Got a first up, trustee Lundy, White, second, trustee White. Roll call, please, Allison.
Trustee Lundy. Aye. Trustee White.
Aye.
Trustee Shomas.
Aye.
Trustee Bonnie. Trustee Walton.
Aye.
Excellent, motion passes. Thank you. Up next, we have public comments, again, for any items up for discussion or any other things that you would like to discuss. But tonight, under discussion, we have our liquor store pour license for video gaming request, priority capital projects list, a zoning ordinance text amendment for transportation uses, police facility fencing, and budget workshop number 2. Any public comment at this time? Going once, going twice. Sold 3 times, that's perfect. We'll close that portion. All right, first up under discussion, liquor store pour license for video gaming request. Walter. Allison. I guess I gotta go back. I gotta say, hold on, let me stay up with you. Because I'm sure your name is at the top of the board. All right, go ahead, Allison.
Sure. So last week we had a gentleman come in. He's in the audience tonight. Come in. They're looking to purchase Village Liquor and was inquiring regarding a pour license to allow video gaming. While we did create the gas station / convenience store license, I think it was actually just the meeting before, we do not have a mechanism to allow a pour license in liquor store. We did talk about it on staff, talked with the chief, and we were unable to actually find anything like that in other communities. And based on our discussions and our looking around at our survey of other communities, we do not recommend creating that license at this time. If the board is obviously free to make their decision, but that was the recommendation just based on what we have found in our discussion with staff.
Okay. Any additional questions or discussion out of the board? No. I think that the
Hey, I
yep.
got a comment. We already have a liquor license for a full license with video gaming at home bar. It sounds like that's what they want to do, so why don't we just call it a bar?
Well, it's a package store, and so I don't know that they actually. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, we have a gentleman here, but basically it's to remain a liquor store or a package store, and just allow gaming in a package store, is what the request is.
Okay.
Part of the,
Because the single can beer served over there.
I'm sorry.
Single can beers.
Single chamber.
yeah, part of the discussion at the staff level was that with the fuel station convenience license that was recently created, we do anticipate that the plan station that kind of generated this at the southwest corner of Molina and 47 will be seeking one of those licenses. We do anticipate that the gas station across will be seeking that license. So we think there'll be 2 additional gaming, venues in the community in the next 6, 12 months, whatever the time frame is. And we haven't maybe super recently, but on a regular basis, we do get inquiries from video gaming cafes that the board may be interested in the future. And the part of the thought was if there, at what point is the market saturated? And second, if it was going to be expanded further, would a different environment potentially bring more benefit to the community versus putting it in existing? And one of the comments I made actually was, I get the liquor store something different than something else, but at its core, it's a retail establishment. Well, where do you? And I don't want to be the alarmist slippery slope, but at what point do you say, okay, anybody could get one? You know what I mean? Like, and I get it. That's not a big leap for a packaged liquor store as much as a big leap as it might be to something else. But theoretically, anybody could come in and say, create a license for whatever. But the main thing was we just feel right now, having 2 more coming online, let's not go too fast down this road. But certainly that's staff's opinion. But,
And I think through staff discussion, one of the things that we talked about too is there's a slippery slope of creating a policy for everyone who wants something, and there's nothing to separate this retail user from Jewel, who sells liquor. So are we now going to move gaming as an option into the grocery store?
Well, I kind of feel there's nothing to separate this from the gas station on the corner, because it's a convenience store. They sell something different than, or in addition to what this store sells. I'm not saying I like the idea,
Right.
but I think maybe we already created that slope.
Ooh, that's a valid point.
I don't. They sell potato chips there. They sell candy there. They sell cigars there.
Yeah, but do you want gaming in the Jewel? Because
that's
then,
not the question.
well, it is kind of, because if you create the use, then you're basically creating a use for this end user to then circumvent that anyone who does sell packaged liquors in a retail environment can't do it.
I don't disagree with you, but I don't see that there's much difference at all.
Understood.
Convenience store.
Yeah. Does anybody else have anything to add, one way or another?
Well, I feel that the gas station's primary source of income is not liquor. It's going to be gasoline, maybe snacks and food. Liquor, I'm sure, is a portion of that. A liquor store's primary source of income is purely liquor. Their license is to sell liquor. So my thought on it would be that if it's a primary source of income, where it's only liquor and it's not a bar, I have an issue with it. Another avenue for us as a village would be to maybe look at those gaming cafes that will sell liquor but also food and have tables, and it's not just a actual packaged liquor store. But I do understand where you're coming from.
Do we have to? Did we do it for the gas station because of its size?
The lot size.
Otherwise, it would have qualified.
Yeah, I believe it's certain acreage and a certain amount of diesel fuel sales qualifies it for video gaming as a full truck stop.
Yeah.
And you meet that, but
So they theoretically will meet the diesel portion of it. Well, they have to.
Right. Well, not if we grant them up. If we grant them up, if I'm understanding it, if we give them a pour license, none of that matters.
Right, my understanding is they do not qualify under the state, and that's why we.
Because of the acreage, not
Because of
because of
what?
the diesel.
Acreage.
Because of acreage or because of?
I don't know about diesel.
That's what I was kind of wondering. Is that?
But they have to have both.
Try to differentiate them.
They have to have both are qualified for under the state where they wouldn't have to approach the village at all. That's my understanding. Because they don't meet either the acreage and or the diesel fuel sales. That's why they came in to say, hey, other gas stations can do this. We're at a competitive disadvantage. I mean, if you remember, I believe, if I walk up with you, when Graham's came in at the corner, they bought the vacant lot to the north, I think, to meet the minimum acreage.
The vacant lot. You are to the north.
Yeah. So they didn't have to get anything local because they sell enough of the fuel and they have enough.
So this one applies, so the one for the convenience applies to this potential new one and the BP?
Yes. category, you do not create the license. Right. So they would have to come back in and request a license. If you were to give it, you would create it. But we now have the category in the ordinances.
Off topic, but the parcel that's to the north of Graham's is on the market.
Yeah, my understanding is that while it's on the market, they don't intend to sell it. It would be they would, no, I think they're marketing like that to get interest, but I believe the plan is a build to lease where they would retain ownership
of the
land.
property. Okay.
Yes.
I think it was like a category deal, just wanted to decide.
No, I think they are interested in something happening on it, but not.
Okay, but they're not going to relinquish ownership,
Right.
so that it doesn't interfere with their
Right.
license of the gas. Okay. So on this particular item, I'm just looking for consensus on, the staff recommendation to not address it at this time, deny the request. How do you like that?
What was that?
Deny the request.
I don't know, really comments, it's kind of a slippery slope.
It is.
So, obviously, it's just up for discussion.
Yep.
So I don't have any-
And certainly nothing prevents you in the future at any point in time
Yeah.
from reconsidering it. I mean, you can do it 3 months,
Next
6
meeting.
months. Yeah, next meeting.
You could do it.
And I think what we're looking for is, direction.
Direction.
Tonight is, do you want us to start drafting an ordinance or just, let it go for now?
I wouldn't, I'd want to think about this more.
Sure.
So I wouldn't say start drafting something. I also would encourage you to start cutting costs on.
Right. Well, and I don't know if that's a condition of your purchase, right? If that's for you to decide. But at this, Mike, do you have any concern? I mean, you did express some concern, so I guess my question is.
My comment was kind of tongue in cheek and couldn't see my speaker over the phone. I'm kind of aligned with Jamie. Really, what I was trying to make comment was that there really isn't a differentiation then in their business between the liquor store and the bar, and yes, of course, from health and stuff like that. So that's what they want to do is become a bar, and so be it. Yeah, I think Jamie's comment based on what I heard is, I think the bigger subject really should be, what the board feels about gaming in general in the village, and how many of these sort of locations do we want to open? We want to open it up to everyone. I could see pros and cons why we wouldn't do that and have stuff like that in the jewel. If you think that's what they wanted to do, it's hard to do it now. But whatever. So yeah, I think jumping into it for this case, I certainly support the staff's findings on it. I think it's a little premature. Let's keep talking about it and have some consideration with respect to what we want to be moving forward in general and these types of things.
Thank you.
Would they qualify if they had a tasting license?
Allison?
One moment. I do not believe so because our tasting license does not allow for. Sorry. They do not actually qualify. Sorry.
Yeah, maybe they have tastings at the clinic.
Right. Obviously, they apply for both, regular, retail establishments, so they need a tasting license, but we would have a tasting license here. Yeah.
If they both, right?
Yeah.
It's a good question on that. Better look at that.
I think at this time, I'm not struggling with papers.
Okay.
I struggle with it because I have a hard time seeing the difference.
Okay.
But I don't want to understand something with jewel and
Right.
stuff like that.
Right. I mean, it's sad to say this, but I've said to people, I said, it is out of sight, out of mind for me, but because I don't go into the gas station to, I buy gas at the gas station and I leave. I don't see the actual gaming happening there, and that's really where it is. in town. So it's out of sight, out of mind, unless you're one that sees it because you're walking in. You don't all of a sudden want it to be so prevalent that it's everywhere, you know. So it sounds like the board is willing to revisit this if need be, but what I'm getting from all of you is just right now it's a no unless staff can figure out. I mean, basically what I would say to you is you have to prevent it from going in retail establishment like the Jewel. So can you craft something that would create that?
I mean, without checking with Laura, we probably could, you know, I don't know. Yeah, but I guess it's more of just they may, you know, we could craft something that says, okay, or you could craft a packaged liquor store that gets the majority of its income off liquor sales or license. I mean, we could create it. It's really just a policy question. Is that where you want to go?
Frankly, I'd rather see it there than in, you know, that open range. You know, kids can't go to the bathroom there without walking past it.
Yeah, but you're not taking it out of the range, though.
Pardon?
I go, but you're not taking it out of the range.
Oh, I know. That's weird. That's why I'm less and less bothered by it in the liquor store.
Right.
Because, you know, it's adults that are going in there, it's not kids. It's, you know, we can make up their own mind about that. You know, we can craft something to smaller size or something. I don't know. Like I said, I'm still thinking about this. And, you know, I'm not ready today, but.
Yeah, I think we revisit for a different discussion. See if staff can come back with anything else, but the board's willing to hear it again. I don't know, like I said, if that prohibits you from moving forward with your transaction. I will tell you that Jewel and Sugar Grove touts that they have the highest liquor sales of anyone on holiday weekends. So Sugar Grove is a great place to buy and sell. So if that's a proponent for you to go forward with Village Liquors, you know what I mean? Woo-hoo. A lot of travel through here going north and south. Don't leave it just on the gaming. I think it's still a good business. Okay, thank you. Priority capital projects list. Rent, right? Am I looking?
Me, Allison, whoever.
Anything around here anymore?
I was just thinking that.
A lot.
All right.
No, this is I believe we now do this twice a year is the current plan, is to take a look at and update this. And I think one of the key distinctions is the word priority. This is not the CIP plan. This is not every capital project. The primary purpose of this is when we talk to officials at other levels of government, occasionally the county, but a lot of times the state or even federal level, where it's like, hey, if we need help with different projects, or sometimes they reach out to us and say, hey, do you have something? There's a new program that might fit a project here. So we keep this list ongoing. We currently look at it twice a year, and so you can see in your packet the changes that staff is proposing from the current one would be to eliminate the business development incubator concept in the 160 building, based on the fact we're actually looking to place it on the market, not finish it out. I think a lot of that was driven by the cost of finishing out, not even getting into whether that's a business the village should be in. And then you can see before that, just an update to the price on the pedestrian crossing based on PDI's last work. We are proposing to add the Phase Lane Bridge, a new village hall, and upgrades to this building for the police when they move in someday. Under the police one, I want to emphasize the words that their project can be done in phases. The total cost we put there is $650,000. It's a reasonable estimate for a lot of work to be done here, including adding a Sally Port to it at some point in the future. Obviously, those numbers could change, but I think the part I want to emphasize there is if admin and finance moved out, they would start utilizing the balance of the building with no changes at all. So it's not like this money has to be spent for them to get the value out of the building, but we do all recognize for them to get the best use of it in the interim until someday a new police station is built, that there would be improvements would be needed. And then at the staff level, again, based on it being the priority capital projects, we're recommending to eliminate the Prairie Street 47 realignment and signalization. Again, we think it's a long-term project, but when you look at the cost of it and the cost benefit ratio of that versus some of the other projects that we have on here. Staff felt that is one that could be dropped from the list at this time. One of the problems is if you make the list too long, well, is it really a priority anymore if everything's on it? So that's our suggestion for the spring 2022 update for the capital projects list.
I have a couple of comments. So why do we still list the municipal drive pedestrian crossing when we are, I know it's not, it's verbal, but we're getting, basically if I were to present this list to one of our senators, I'm like, oh yeah, but you're giving me a $100,000 grant for that, so why are we keeping it here? And then the second part of that is, we need a project that's less than 1.5 on this list. So I need staff to come up with another priority capital project that fits under $1.5 million.
I don't know why, I can't remember if it was on there before or not, because what immediately comes to mind still is the traffic signal in the park.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember, is that $600,000?
Well, it is funded, but it's not.
It's not approved.
Okay, so that's why, yeah, so I guess it would be similar to this.
So I guess, yeah, right.
But no, you make a good point, though, yeah, we got coming up with something.
Yeah, I mean, especially as we're getting ready to go to Springfield, and we're gonna give them our list and be like, let's start in reverse at $370 million for the metro. And then work backwards.
Yep.
But it's nice if they have some spare change that they can throw our way, that we have an item on our list that would qualify. Because right now, my first ask is for 1.5. I know that's covered and funded, that's funded, so.
Well, the police station's $650.
Well, then let's order, I guess this is right, I want to see them in order by dollar, and you have been ordered by technically priority, I guess is what that's.
No, actually, no, that was just an oversight too, because it is always by order, so I
Okay.
apologize.
Why do you have the public safety center and the village hall operating?
I'm sorry, Heidi, can you repeat the question?
Public safety center
Yep.
and operating village hall police department
Because the long-term goal
is
to build a new facility.
Okay, so that's the, all right. That is long.
And this is the temporary, could be, like you talked about, could be 10, 15-year fix.
Right. That's what
Before we get here, but to keep this on as a goal, I guess.
Okay, so that's.
The board has not discussed, or maybe we have, but as a reminder, we own the corner at Municipal and 30, and that is still being held for a future site at this point, so we didn't put that in our other plans to sell off, like the R160, 140. And then obviously the big one is the, site improvements at the interchange. $31 million. So like I said, it's fun to ask for those things, and then it's like, okay. But I have 200,000 I can give you. I'm like, all right, that's not gonna get us very far on those items, so we need some.
And not that there's anything pending or anything happening, but yeah, obviously when you start getting to those, it's much more likely, not that it's likely at the federal level versus the state, but yeah, there are occasions where there are significant dollars become available at the federal level.
No, I'm not saying take them off the list. I think it's, totally appropriate, but the nice thing is that we're getting the municipal, we're getting a grant there, so that's taken care of, and staff has done a phenomenal job on grants, because we've got a lot of money coming in. It's been a good 12 months as far as grant approval with the safe routes to school, and the grant for the pedestrian bridge that uses the county and the township and park district and the village to get that done, and then just getting this nice $100,000. It could be a little bit more, maybe it will cover the whole thing, I don't know, but Matt, do we have the difference of 44 budgeted? Yeah. So, all right.
You good?
We're good.
The tweaks we talked about, push the village hall upgrade one up so it's in the right numerical order. To leave the pedestrian crossing out here, I think that was really the only changes to what we presented.
Yeah. And there's nothing we can find under 650? What's that? Yeah, the senator, out of his pocketbook, is giving it to us.
We don't have a grant agreement, right?
Right. But it's coming. It's coming. meeting here, Marge. All right,
Thank you.
thank you. On zoning ordinance text amendment, that is Walter. Transportation uses.
We're proposing an amendment to the zoning ordinance to accommodate two things. One, clarify what's permitted in terms of transportation uses in the industrial districts, and to accommodate the interest of a local trucking business that has a contract to purchase one of the vacant lots on Hartman Drive, locate their facility. And as I mentioned, we do have these uses, or this use, already represented in the village. It's just that we don't specifically call it out in the permitted use table. And the contract purchaser of the vacant lot, while they're receptive to our interpretation of the permitted use table, they're looking for much more clarity and certainty that they're a permitted use in the zoning district. So we proposed amending the zoning ordinance to identify local trucking without storage as a permitted use, and they were comfortable with that because that's the nature of their business. So as we were investigating what that use is and what other transportation uses are out there, we found using the standard industrial classification, we found that there's many transportation uses already out there, most of which are, I would say, inappropriate for Sugar Grove. So we didn't consider those as possibilities. But the ones that we did are identified in the amendment. Local trucking without storage, which is specifically what it is. It's a local trucking business, and they don't provide any storage on site. There are local trucking businesses where they do have storage on site, but this is not what that's not what we're recommending being added to the permitted use table. Courier Services, that's another type of transportation use that's classified in the standard industrial classification, and we have several of those in town already. And so we felt as long as we're amending this for transportation uses, we may as well legitimize that use. So we've added that to the permitted use table. And lastly, passenger transportation. Now this is a much more broader, and we cherry-picked the type of passenger transportation uses we felt was appropriate for Sugar Grove situation. So things like limousine services, charter buses, taxi services, that type of passenger transportation seems appropriate. And we specifically excluded bus transportation like school buses, public transportation like PACE, things things like that. So that's the nature of the proposed amendment. Specifically, we for the three types of transportation uses, we had a cutoff of 20 or more vehicles that would be a special use. At the staff level, we felt that 20 vehicles, whether they're cars, buses, or trucks and trailers, that's a lot, and it's going to take up a lot of space. And I think we want to have a little more scrutiny over the design and the operation of that type of business. So we've identified those as special uses in the industrial districts. And we've also identified additional standards and criteria for all of the transportation uses, and specifically for the local trucking without storage. and specifically, we don't want any cargo stored on the premises, so we want to avoid the old Dominion type of operation where, that's just a truck terminal. We don't want that. And a warehouse, while warehouses are permitted in the industrial district, I think what we're trying to avoid is, that truck terminal type of operation. We also want to, place some limitations on where the fleet vehicles can be parked. So that's some of the additional standards, and we also require just through one. I mentioned the cargo. One of the characteristics about the fleet operations is, they have a fleet, so they want to maintain their fleet. So we're recognizing that they can't have maintenance facilities, a garage for maintenance of the vehicles, have an accessory use on the property, and if semi-trailers need to be parked and stored on the premises, we're looking at a ratio of 1:1, so one trailer for each tractor. Because if you're operating a trucking fleet, there's probably no reason to have extra trailers. As long as they're all attached to a tractor, that seems good enough for us. The Plan Commission generally was supportive of the proposed amendment, but they seem to focus on what short-term storage meant. And I can understand the concern, but unfortunately I don't necessarily agree with the time limit that they came up with. Because 48 hours is only, that's a weekend, but in a business operation, at the end of business on Friday and starting business on Monday morning, that's more than 48 hours. And I also could foresee where there could be some trucks that are idle for an extended period of time, more than 48 or 72 hours. So that's why we're suggesting maybe that needs to be bumped up to 14 days. And that's something that is a little easier for staff to monitor and control than trying to keep track of everybody's fleet operations over the weekends. So that's, I think I've covered all of the salient points with the amendment. Hopefully we've addressed the obvious concerns with this type of use. But bear in mind that the use is already established in the community. We're just making it legitimate with this amendment.
Thank you, Walter. Discussion?
I kind of like the idea of it. I probably want to sit down and some of the language stuff. Okay. I haven't had the opportunity to kind of pick at it and roll around a little bit. I mean, that's really.
This discussion.
Yeah.
If you want to get together with Walter.
That's kind of my thought.
Okay. Anyone at, I know you're there, Mike, do you have any discussion on this item?
No, I don't.
Okay. Do you, I guess my concern is you're suggesting the 48 hours be moved to 14 days. So I just want to understand what this really means. Semi-trailers are permitted on the premises at 1-to-1 ratio. One semi-trailer is permitted for each semi-tractor parked on the premises. 1-to-1 ratio, but still not to exceed 20. So if you have a trailer, right, it's still within that 20.
Mm-hmm.
How big is the property?
Well, this particular property that that this business has under contract is actually it's the smallest lot out there, and they only have 6 trucks in their operation. But we have some on Hartman Drive that have more than 6 vehicles in their fleet. So that's why we want to. We don't want to make it so tight that we inadvertently make a problem for somebody
Who's been operating?
Right.
Yeah. And this obviously will be a fenced off,
Yes.
storage yard kind of thing. Okay.
Quite frankly, I don't know why we need a limit. So you got, if you're the trucking operation, you have an extra truck that's gonna sit there, whether it's for a month or 2 months. If it's behind your fence, and I don't know what difference that makes.
Our concern is the trailers, not necessarily the tractors, because what we don't want is the property to become a storage lot for trailers. That's what we're trying to avoid. And this user understands what we're trying to do, and they have no issue with it. That's not what they're into. But I'm familiar with situations in other communities where, you have an industrial property and it's used for something, and then something ceases operation, and lo and behold, the parking lot is used to store trailers, and it becomes unsightly. So that's what we're trying to prevent. That's really what the purpose of the regulations is all about, is to allow the trucking business to occur and operate, but we don't want it to morph into a trailer storage lot.
I know Jamie wants to talk to Walter separately, but just to work through some of the language in here too. Does anyone have any concerns? I mean, as staff's recommendation is to change the 48 hours for parking for short term from 48 hours to 14 days, 2 days to 14 days. Any issue? Okay. Sounds like, Walter, that can be changed. Anything else?
Do these guys own over trucks, or do they have?
Yes.
So they're also private.
So,
Are they owner operators, or is this a company that owns all the trucks?
no, the company owns the trucks.
It's definitely thorough and trying to not isolate the other businesses that are already in use. So I'm sure it was a slippery slope as you went through this. What's that? We get a lot of slippery slopes in the village. Don't slip down that slope. Well, I think it looks good. I mean, we'll see what you all discuss and bring back.
I'll get together with Trustee White, we'll
Perfect.
hammer it out, and we'll bring it back to next.
Bring it back hopefully for general business next meeting. Unless that was, I mean, you need to get this done. It's not a conference. We'll bring it
When it's
for next-
ready.
When it's ready. Okay. We'll go with that, Brent. All right. Next up, we have the police facility fencing. Pat, or actually, is this Pat or Brad?
Yes. Oh.
Yeah.
Throw Tony in there too, and that's paying for it, so you got the whole game over there.
All right. Let's look at our plans.
Walter and also work on special events, the fencing could have an impact on that, so I think you got
The whole crew. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Yeah, Walter's involved too.
Well,
Like it or not.
yeah, because we're gonna have to get a zoning variation.
For our own property. All right.
So basically, this was brought up at the mid-year budget. Trustee Bonnie recommended fencing that in, and quite honestly, me and Chief couldn't agree more. So we looked at some options, met with the fence contractor that did well 9 behind here, well 8, like all of the facilities we've been done by Northern Illinois Fence. We went over some options with the gentleman, received some proposals for the electrical end of the job, the security, like the access control, because there would be gates that would have, a fobbed entrance just like the back door does now. Talked about gate options. As you can see, there's 2. I should have labeled these the 2 options, but one would keep the fence closer to the back parking lot, the access road, and then one would bring it into the middle of the grass area there to the north. And then obviously the area with the variance that requires a variance is highlighted in yellow. Cost-wise, they're about the same. The only difference is the brick pillars appear the option of keeping the fence further south would require minimum 1, and if we go further north, it would require minimum 2. And if you wanted more on the corners, whatever, we could do whatever you would like.
Okay, can I be first up on this one? So, as we have food truck Fridays in the parking lot, and we utilize the grass space in that area, I would be concerned about page 39 or 40, where you cut diagonally across the grass area. So I lean toward 41. What's the difference between 41 and 42?
It just shows its own variance.
Okay, so I obviously lean toward that 41. I would like for the cohesive look of it. It's so funny when you think, and then, so when you all leave tonight, you know, obviously you can look at the outside, the well, and where those brick pillars are. In my mind, I thought they were more pillars and less fencing. And so what I would propose on page 41 is that there be a pillar in the back northeast corner instead of just dead fence. Because that corner, you guys have existing pillar here, so they can tie into that pillar,
Yes.
run that back fence to the next pillar, come down, pillar here
Okay.
at that corner. It can just dead into with a gate into the building at that point, but you have a pillar, you're tying into this pillar, and you've added this pillar. So I'm looking at three adds. Three total new pillars, unless anyone thinks that you need to. The only other thing I think, because I don't want to move a fence, so the area that you have between the building and where the fence comes out, Chief, unless you tell me differently, that's just where I think a Sally Port would be added on.
We talked about that. If we didn't put any pillars up near the building there,
You can move the fence.
The fence, this is fairly
Yeah.
easy to move this fence.
Okay.
So that's why I would probably put, up here, the entrance,
Okay.
and then your other two corners.
Yep.
Withhold the one from on that corner there, just because.
And then maybe add it after the fact if we needed to.
Good, yes.
Okay.
Yes. But me and Chief talked about it. We envisioned that Sally Port coming off to the, what would you call it, south-ish.
Yeah. Especially if we did that sooner rather than later, then it's obviously you're still on that side of the building and the Sally Port's connected. Okay. Does anybody have any thoughts?
The back area, I mean, that back corner that you were talking about, it's up on a hill.
It goes up on the berm a little bit. We'll hold it down a little bit. It's kind of hard to draw like that.
Yeah, well, I'm just wondering if it would be easier to just keep it,
We could
kind of cut off that corner, so to speak.
We could do that some. Then you add up here, edge more of that.
I would leave piers in the back. Not if you're quite burning the roof.
Well, I guess my question is, why do we need that much grass space back there?
It's really, it looks more than it is. Basically, we envision coming off 10 foot off in the back of dumpster enclosure.
Yeah.
To allow access from the lawnmower to get around since it'll be fenced in. And then to allow room for snow removal and stacking, in the winter times.
Do you have enough room if you keep the fence on the low side of the berm?
Yes, we can do that. Yeah.
And then you have a need for, I think aesthetically it looks dumb if you don't.
But it's the back.
Yeah, but you can see it from 30.
I mean, I could maybe see one putting, at this point here, but I don't think you'll need it back here.
How much is your cost?
$7,000.
Yeah. Is it worth $7,000?
That's what you have in
That's what
there.
they have on here is $7,000 per period.
I don't think we need one of that.
Alright, we're getting voted
I'm
down.
a little,
Aesthetics.
prefer
But
to
I think
say
that's an estimate. You don't
$7,000.
have a firm number over the $7,000 either.
No, that's just rough figures. That's an estimate from a concrete company and an estimate from a masonry company. Just rough estimates.
Is this one out to
Concrete
bid?
requires 2 visits.
This one out to bid?
It'll have to. Yeah.
That's fine. I'll lose this battle.
I was just looking for some design. Make sure before we finish it and put it out to bid, I'll make sure that we're bidding what everybody desires.
We have one just to counter everybody's argument. There is one on the back of the well that we're tying into that exists already. to the point, you're actually gonna see the pillar in the back more from 30 than you really do this pillar that we have at the back of the well house.
It was only 4 grand then though.
That was a different board.
I don't know, I look at it like, this is not, I mean, doing all the things that we're trying to do, I don't know, I don't want it to look. Can you agree to that if it doesn't look great, can you make this decision on the fly if the
Yes,
board approves it?
we can set the date up so the price per pier,
Okay,
you know, so that you guys can decide at that time.
okay, okay.
If that makes it easier.
And then we'll put some temporary cones out there.
Right, and when we can look at it, what, the board meeting, let's find out.
We'll build a temporary wall.
Right, like they'll buy
Plywood.
free.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then put some of the rubber, cut that end off.
Right, I think that, I don't know, I just think it flanks it. You've got one on this corner, you've got, adding one on that corner finishes it, and then you have 2 in the front. But I understand, we're not trying to waste money. Just want it to look pretty as we do it. It's not gonna look right, Jamie, it's gonna look like we forgot to put a pier up. I'm just saying. I'm of the mindset to do it once and hopefully we do it right, but we'll make that decision after the fact. So you will go to bid on this and then come back to the board for, does anybody have a different opinion on the fence line? That was the big thing too.
I just want to ask Chief, do you have an opinion on either the diagonal or the one that follows the road? What's that?
You're
overrated. Oh, you're overrated.
overridden,
Overrated.
kind of like me. Chief, we're in the same boat.
No, I'm okay with either one, so, eventually the grass section is the desired, so or not, so that eventually have to be relocated or removed.
How large is Sally Point?
How long is that grass?
Really? I mean, I look at the makeshift Sally Port that we had and think it's not that big.
It wasn't big enough.
I understand, but it's really,
No, I think the main thing, Brad, like you said, it's not that difficult to move that fence.
The fence itself in the standard post with the pier is a different story.
Right.
So if
Yeah.
I would avoid putting a pier
in the front.
other than out by the road.
Right.
You know, but
Is a Sally Port less than $1.5 million?
What are we talking about? Is this a loaded question? Oh, yeah, that's true. That's in the 650.
Yeah.
So that's in that
That's in
number.
that 650?
Yeah. Listen, I'm afraid to answer. Trustee, Shomas, are you with me still?
Yeah. Hey, the difference in the layout of the fence, between 40 and 41, where it kind of helps the drive versus coming out of the whole, was there a reason for that? Is there some big expansion or something like that, in the image there on page 30? Or was it just two differences, variations of the people that you saw?
well, because for the gate to go either way, we're gonna have to go into the well house property with the gate now. So
Okay, it was they had, if you see on page 40, they have another pillar because the gate is gonna slide. So if you have the 2 pillars on page 40, then the gate would slide to the north. But on page 41, correct me if I'm stating this wrong, we have 1 pillar right by the drive, so the gate will then slide into the well house area, fenced in area on the south. So the gate will go south.
Oh, okay. All right.
That's the help in the preparation of the Sally Port when we remove it, so we're not moving gates, creating these additional expenses. So this is the best option for us, is always designed on page 41.
Okay. Chief said the best option in design is on 41 so that the gate doesn't have to move. And if they build it so that it slides south, that helps them with future plans for the Sally Port. And not having to relocate the gate. Okay. Do y'all feel like you have direction from that discussion? I think that we're leaning toward page 42. And and you'll get a bid to price the piers separately.
Oh wait, can I go,
Yeah.
what is the variance for?
The height of the fence in the front yard, or the yard along.
Okay. Excellent. All right. Thank you, everyone. I just for our public audience members at this time, I would love to have you here. We're going to go into budget workshop number 2. It may be a little dry, is the right word. So if you're not interested in sitting in a very long budget discussion, we appreciate it. We're not offended if you leave.
Yeah, don't put up such a flag.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
All right.
I'm gonna escort to the doorway.
I'm like the door that's marked men.
That's good. All anyways.
All right, Matt. Here we go. You got a drink of water, some hot tea over there, Mike. We're getting ready to go on budget workshop number 2. Do you want to come up here? Let me just test to see if you can hear clearly, because I think Jamie last time he was on the meeting, he dialed in and he couldn't hear Matt. So I don't know. Could you hear Matt earlier? Matt, can you just talk in a normal voice?
Mike, can you hear me?
Mike, did you hear him?
Yeah.
Is it you can or cannot?
I cannot.
Cannot. Come on up. Come to the head of the class. All right. We're going to take a 5-minute recess for folks to take a bathroom break. Mike. Right. We are all back and ready to go. So let's resume. Matt, take it away.
Okay, so to start budget workshop 2, we're going to kind of go over the items that we discussed that needed clarification or had questions at the first one. So the first to start is lot projections for 22 and 23. So we did review all of this. Walter did review as well. So we pulled back the average permit that was pulled for different subdivisions that were projecting lots for. So Hanford, Settlers Ridge, we used Settlers Ridge. We didn't have a huge thing because Ryan Homes hasn't really built anything, so we used what their permit was for the spec home.
Okay.
And use that as our number for how much building permits are going to cost on average for them. And then Hanford, we took an average of, since May 1st of 2020, what an average permit cost. So we updated those numbers, and then looked at how many lots we were projecting, and we did reduce Hanford down by 2 to 3, I believe, or 2. So we're projecting actually still 30 in Settlers Ridge, 2 in Hanford, and 1 just kind of other permit throughout the village.
Okay.
So that resulted with all those changes in a reduction of about $20,700 in revenue with the new averages and new lot projections. At the last board meeting, we had discussions on the economic development department as a whole, and we did discuss some salary stuff, but also upping the amount for the total budget by $5,000 more, so that is reflected in here now with those updated numbers. And then the third one was discussion on body worn cameras. And mainly in regards to the data storage. And what we determined is it is included up to a point. The only thing we were missing was the redaction software that's needed. So that is $12,900. So that will be added. So instead of, we projected about using about $19,000 and some change of the grant, we are projected to use the whole $22,000 in the first year.
Okay.
And then the other thing was is the same company that we've gotten one quote for, which is Axon for the body worn, updated their taser replacement program. So that's the additional. We had budgeted $7,500. Their new cost is $8,900. So in total, the increase for an overall impact, because we looked at, that's the net effect. The $11,822 is the net effect to the general fund. So that's in using part of the revenue that we're getting from the grant, netting it with the $12,900 and the increase of the 14. So net effect to the general fund is 11,000 each.
Okay.
The final discussion was in regards to staff compensation. That was a discussion that started with last week. But currently at the moment, the general fund is now projected to still have a budget of surplus of $50,485 with all of those changes.
Great. Can I just pause you for a second, real fast? So as we talk about compensation, we did last meeting, let me focus my eyeballs. We need to discuss general compensation for all our employees below department heads in the public. So we need to address where we are and where this particular budget has been presented at. If it's at 5% with the two.
Just for senior staff. So
Okay.
village-wide is.
But the steps are included as
Yes,
well
so
here.
village-wide for everybody but senior staff is 5% plus their normal steps based on performance and other issues.
Okay. So, so I just wanted to go back. I have made multiple phone calls to different mayors around the area to see what they're doing and what their boards are discussing. So you all should have received through email a list of different municipalities and what they were discussing as percentages. Some are finalized, like Batavia, because their calendar year is their budget year. So they approved a 3.25 on average. I think their public works department approved, they have a union of 9% over 3 years. They can take that. They can't take 9% the first year and then sit still, but they can fluctuate 3.2, 2.75 kind of thing. It's a 9% or 3% annual average. Well, who was it? It was, I spoke to Sycamore. They hadn't finalized the number. Elburn, I spoke to Elburn. That number was budgeted at 6.6, but it hadn't been addressed with their board members yet to discuss, so I don't know how that turned out. But the average has been under or right around 3%, most municipalities. And then when I asked, like, Mayor Shelby out of Batavia, I said, well, what do you do with merit and bonus? And he said, we do steps. We don't do that because we don't want someone to think, well, you're friends with the administrator, you're friends with the mayor and the board, and they've all voted mine through. And that, to me, the way I look at merit, if you will, is if you're employed here, we're happy with your service, and if you accept employment, then you're happy to work here. If staff below us they have their steps that are due, then we've done that. And I think we have this juggling act between department heads, which we'll go into closed session tonight to discuss department heads individually, for just a first pass, but the merit portion and then bonus portion for them. But if you're employed here, you know, we're happy with your service. We're trying to compensate well. I think we have a great staff overall. I think everyone is fabulous. We're trying to support all of our staff and the things that we're authorizing through this board. So I met with Matt and Brent to kind of go over the numbers, and I'm comfortable with what was put out, so I want your feedback at 2.825 as a COLA cost of living increase for staff. So separate discussion, you know, let's talk about closed session, our individual department heads, but for COLA and understanding what we budgeted 5, right, for COLA, that based on comparables around us and what folks are doing, I think 2.85 is a reasonable number. And yet it's still higher than some. Someone, I think Geneva was 2, North Aurora might have been 2.5, they might have been 3. So, but there was multiple municipalities under at 2.5. The majority of them are under 3. Any thoughts? I'm talking just COLA, cost of living increase for, plus that, obviously they have their steps. So if there's someone in Public Works that's got that coming, then, but I'm just we're trying to get to a place, I don't want to get to a place where we don't figure it out for months, and then we approve a budget that, you know, granted, it's just gonna end up being surplus if you go below that 5%. But I'd like to be able to put a number forward and a budget forward that we've agreed on.
My recollection from that, maybe it's from discussion, is that, you know, if you're taking it on a multi-year average, that we're and we've been doing very well with that, frankly.
Yes.
I could struggle with this because, I like that we pay our people well. But I do get that, we have to be careful not to outlet ourselves.
I just want to add, when you did look at that spreadsheet, there was a year, I think COLA was like 1%, and we paid higher than that, so.
Well, and my thought, that kind of came to me sitting here was, if we go with that number, which I think I'm okay with, we can always, if next year is another big year, say, we need to step it up because, it's 2 years in a row.
Right.
That's my thinking.
Well, and this is my thinking, with everything that's going on in the world, and everything that's going on in Russia and Ukraine, and all of the things, we can't absorb the cost of living increases that everyone in America is dealing with. So we can't, I look at my own family income and say, this really sucks, but my husband's company isn't going to cover the cost of the fact that when you go through the grocery store over bread or whatever, right, because of wheat prices, that doesn't fall solely on us as a burden. We understand that there's a rise, and this is, I don't have it in front of me, but I think 3.825 is one of the larger numbers. If it's not the highest that we paid in COLA.
Well, 2.825 is the average of the two contracts.
What is the highest we've paid COLA over the last 5 years?
To non-represented,
Yes.
2.38.
2.63 last
2.63,
year.
last year was 2.62.
Which was higher than CPI. So I think we're doing right by our staff. They're getting these.
In fact, 2.825, which is the average of patrol and sergeant over 8 years. From the memo, we picked 8 years being the median or average tenure for non-represented full-time staff. It puts us almost exactly with inflation over that 8 years. We started at 100 and added every year. If you compound inflation over the years, that $100 turned into $119.68. At 2.825, it's 119.71. So it's exactly in line with inflation. And the only good, bad, and different, the patrol through bargaining, theirs is less than that, 118.4. The sergeants over that period would have a bigger increase than non-represented. They're at 120.77 compounded. So I think that, if you do the 2.85 average, you're right at CPI. I think the only other thing that I'm not suggesting we do would be, if you want to do something, and I think it was in the memo if I scroll down, if you want to have a case where non-represented did quote at least as well as represented, the higher represented, which would be the sergeants, then we have to increase that amount to accomplish it. I'm not saying we should, just, it was a minimum.
I think we've tried to keep staff in line that are non-represented with represented. I think that before me that was done well, and now that I'm here, I think we continue that. But don't know that we necessarily go above it. Just because, I guess. It's my thought.
I think right now the 2.825 makes absolute sense. I think that we have both union contracts expire at the end of the next fiscal year, so we will be doing those negotiations during the year. What we'll do later this calendar year, we'll update our comparison survey and find out exactly. We do it not only for patrol sergeant, we do it for every position. So when we're at this point next year, if things go well, and last time they went well, hopefully we have one or both union contracts done before they expire, and we're back here knowing what those numbers are going to be, and also knowing where we now stand refreshed with our comparison communities. And say that, if we find that what we've always done in the past, if we find we're out of whack, it's usually not across the board. You know, it's varying amounts. Some are right on, and we've had a couple occasions where by doing this in a couple positions, we actually got a little bit ahead of comparison communities. In those positions, we didn't reduce anybody. We kind of held them for a couple of years and I think we did a bonus, if you will, because we didn't have to face to get ahead. And some other positions, we said, wow, we fell behind, so we need to do a bigger increase. So we will be doing that, at the end of this calendar in anticipation of next year's.
Any thoughts?
I will ask 2.85, simplify that, 5.23, just as a round number. But it sounds like we've never done nice round numbers in the past. Generally, it's kind of, it's kind of off the board, but,
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good with the 285 as well. Jamie?
2825.
Yeah, 2825, sorry.
2825.
Yeah, I think with what Jamie was saying too, I think we're a little bit more conservative this time around. Things are nicer next year around the same time. We're a little bit more, we have a buffer, maybe. We can start looking at maybe a little bit larger number then. But we have a lot of things going on to get ahead of ourselves. I think it's a poor decision. So I think this is in line with everybody else. I have no issue with the 2.85.
Well, the nice thing about this board is you will all be sitting here next year and having the same discussion, which we will all remember, right? That we had this discussion and people aren't changing over, and then we'll be bringing this back. Matt will remind you of what we discussed. But so that we, the goal is to revisit and know what's happened, and we'll see how this all plays out in Russia and Ukraine and what that looks like and how it affects our economy and our staff. But it's still a cost of living increase. And I think it's a reasonable number based on what's happening in the surrounding communities. Heidi?
I'm good.
You're okay with that? Mr. Shomes? Mike?
You've been gracious enough to provide numbers from the other municipalities. Where do our staff, generally speaking, I'm guessing what Elmer was probably doing in a number of 6.6 was probably a recognition that I think a lot of their staff was probably well under market, and it's possible they're using some of their money that we decided to use towards capital projects that they got from various government payoffs to cover some increases in salary. But relatively speaking, generally speaking, we're within markets is the prevailing opinion that we pay our staff that fall into these categories. Are we generally at, are we generally below, or are we generally above?
I think, well, I'll let staff answer that because it's based on, if you look at Public Works in Batavia and the size of their community, the fact that they are represented versus Sugar Grove and the size of our community, I think based on what I've seen, but I would rather defer to Brent when you compare, because you've done that before, when you're comparing us against like-sized communities.
Right. So what we've done is that every 3 or 4 years, in line with the union contracts, renewal, we do an updated salary survey. We take a look at what we would consider comparison communities, and at that time, typically, for most staff, the ranges that we have will adjust them so they pretty much fall in line with what we consider to be comparison communities, and we do a slight tweak to it because we are smaller than some of the ones in our immediate area that are part of our marketplace. And then, the assumption, if you will, is that over the past 3-4 years, that by doing the annual COLA, that will keep pace with the surrounding communities. And I would say historically, with the non-senior staff, we've generally kept pace, we've generally stayed in line, there hasn't been significant moves. Where it's been where it hasn't kept pace, if you will, is that when you do that method at the department head level, you end up with rather wide ranges. You know, where from the bottom to the top, in some cases, without looking up, you know, $30,000 or $40,000 range. And so if you hire somebody in near the bottom of that range, well, to try to move them through, and we typically use 8 years, well, now you got to make up $40,000 over 8 years and COLA moving it. So what happens is you would be coming in, you know, you could be saying just to move somebody through, you're talking about maybe $8,000 raises every year. And historically, for understandable reasons, the board at times has been hesitant to say that's just too big of a raise. So I would say that you do have some department head positions that, based on tenure, may be behind the comparisons. People that have been here a real long time are pretty much right where market is for people that have been in their spot a long time. So that's something we can get into more detailed in closed session. But that's, but overall, with that exception, I think that historically we pretty much keep pace. Like I say, every time we do this, every 3 or 4 years, there's a couple positions we have to tweak. So hopefully
But that's what senior staff.
But even for
go ahead, sorry.
No. My point was, I thought that was for senior staff, where we really had more gaps.
yes. At the lower levels, there's typically been some tweaks, but nothing significant.
Okay, so it sounds like we're in line with.
I assume we will when we go out and do the survey. I have no reason to think that we're not, because
Well, we've been in line, and we're
Yes,
maintaining
right,
COLA,
exactly,
and so we
yes.
should still be in line.
I would think so. Unless something wacky happened, for the most, we should still be along.
Okay, I'm sorry.
What sort of employee turnover have we had at the staff level over the last 12 months or so? Percentage level.
Very
How many
good.
employees have we lost to go somewhere else?
Well, we lost 2 in finance, but I wouldn't say
Not
it was to
because
go
of-
to another community.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Those
But
were
outside of-
other issues.
Outside of that, we have not. I think Chief, yours was the last 3 years ago.
Correct.
That actually.
You're correct, other than
Other than that, yes.
retirement.
So yeah, besides retirement, actually leaving is probably 3 years ago.
And Brad, you haven't had anybody leave. We had some changeover in public works, but not because of, not to go to a different community.
Not recently. Yeah.
Okay. So no, it sounds like,
And,
go ahead.
oh, I'm sorry, finish your point there.
No, I was just gonna say, it sounds like, you know, less than 3%.
Okay. And then again, the second paragraph that you wrote there, Matt, on page 44, where under the current projection, we've got a surplus of 50,000.
Right.
What's being taken into account with that number there? 0,
5.
3%, 5.
It's the 5% plus steps.
So we'll add to the surplus.
Say that again?
We will add to the surplus going from 5% to 2.825. That obviously the 50,000 number goes up.
I would, okay, so based on everything that I've said, I would feel, and I know I'm probably a little bit here, I would prefer to see that be filed to higher. I think 3.25 is probably a little more reasonable, maybe as high as 3.5, but it sounds like I might be a little more on that.
I am a more conservative individual that way, and while I do not think we're underpaying our employees, I think the 2.825 is a reasonable COLA considering the unknown that we're going forward with. And also, we kind of need a year to settle down from these large increments that have come in, and I know that this Merritt does a phenomenal job, and we have new revenue sources. We're also hiring, hopefully, a new department head and staff within that department. And our staff is, I think, is whether in this room, you are first and foremost of our minds, and we want to do right by all of you. But we have to be a little bit conservative in this number and not, Not raise the base to the point where we can't afford it. We can always adjust up, but you can't go down. So that's my thought.
And we're not talking a lot of money here. We always have to keep in mind we have citizens of 10,000 who are just begging for things that we, and even Root and Grow with $8,000. Well,
Right.
it's just little things that can benefit the entire community.
Correct.
I'm not taking just on this, but there's so many little things
Yeah.
you make decisions on, and this is one. I think it's fair.
Yeah.
We have to keep in mind, this isn't a private organization either, you know, this is taxpayers' money. It's not a for-profit company that can pay their employees whatever they want, because they have that money budgeted for themselves, because it's a for-profit. Our money is a little bit different here in the village, it's for the village itself, so. Although we want to pay the employees a good wage, keep them here, show that we love them, that we want them to stay, we also have to keep that in mind.
And let's also do one other thing, because it's not part of there, and I don't need to catch you off guard. But comp time that we give to staff, paid holidays, sick time, how does that all compare? Because there's value there to other communities and what they offer.
Very much in line. That's another thing that because it always comes up in the union negotiations, so when we do that survey, we look at everything from holiday time to sick time to personal days, any days off. Anything that's, in their contracts, we do enough research, because we don't know what they're going to come in, but they're going to come in asking for more of something or probably many things. So we always have to have in mind, and so do they, that if you can't voluntarily negotiate that, you're going to end up before an arbitrator. So you have to be able to show internal and external equity. And so we're, generally speaking, very in line with community on this.
Okay. But it's, as far as public sector and private sector, it's very, and I'm not trying to, because
and this is where I should really be quiet.
You should.
It's a completely unfair comparison.
You should, but you're not.
But I can't, because it's a completely unfair comparison for both. It's two different worlds.
Time out. I bring it up, and I've always said, we're not in a private, this isn't a private business, and our job is to keep our staff comparable with other communities and what the norm is within government. So I say it to you, but as a whole, I think you need to understand that it is a nice package, and we recognize that it is a nice package. It might be afforded to every government employee, but it's still a benefit. And good for you that you're working in government. So that's all. But don't argue about it. All right.
Moving on.
2.825. Mike, I think we have consensus here at 2.825.
Yeah, I don't have a response. I got a vote. Okay.
Okay. Matt, can you adjust that? Sorry. And now we'll let Matt continue on through the workshop.
So just to kind of wrap that up for general fund, the 50,000, if you go to page, it's P52. It shows you what all those changes have done to the reserve.
Hold on, sorry, P52.
So it's still over the 25%, it's at 26.12%. So we're still above the 25, the 50. Again, we had a long discussion on how that's affected with these large sums that we've got in the last few years. So still above it regardless of what has happened going forward with that. So that's going to increase. Okay, so that kind of covers those items from last meeting. If there aren't any further questions, we'll move on to the rest of the budget, which is all other funds. So we'll start with general capital, which is Fund 30. This obviously has a large increase. We've made huge transfers for this year. We've also increased the equipment replacement funding from 50 to 100% and made any changes that were needed based on actual costs for the year. So that has changed. We've also made the transfer this year for the parking lot that we just discussed. We actually did transfer 150,000 this year because at the time the first quote we got was 100, so we were already over that number, so we didn't know So we used 150. We also did 25,000 for public works building flooring replacement, which you'll see the other 25 in water fund.
Can you just refresh my memory? If you said we're already over the 100, where did the original numbers come from?
So
That 121.
So what I was saying is when we started doing this budget, we didn't even have anything but the 100.
Okay.
But that $98,000 number, and I was like, well, we already are blowing that number out of the water. So we used. He said, Brad said, use 150 as the number because we're unsure.
Okay.
So that's where it is, and it fit into our projections and budgets. So we kind of just left it because anything that we don't use that's transferred for that type of stuff is just kind of surplus for other uses.
Okay.
So that's what happened kind of this year in revenues, but expenditures were really close. They were within budget by 30,000. There was an additional purchase of a squad due to accident. So fiscal year 22-23, we do have revenues increasing. Again, this actually does have full funding of 100% for equipment this year, not 50%, which we've done in the past few years. So that's a good thing. And then we also do have a $700,000 transfer for future projects to that fund, as well as we did put sales of $800,000 in for the buildings from 140 and 150/60. It's an estimated number, but right now that number is not used to fund anything yet, so it's not going to affect any budgetary. So expenditures for next year, there are 3 police department. There are 3 vehicles. Those are all being replaced with Tahoes. That's why the costs are all the same. So we're actually going to. Every year you're going to see those are all replacing with Tahoes, so the costs are all going to be identical every year based on estimates.
Can I only ask about that, Chief? You know, we've got a lot of cars back there, and 4 sitting here waiting. What is the right number of cars for us? I mean, that's, to me, it seems like that's a surplus. But I don't know. That's why I'm asking the question.
I appreciate that. So the vehicles that are up front are due to go into outfitting at the end of the month. So we just got rid yesterday how the fronts are in. So probably a vehicle a week, not 5 to 7 days before we'll get one back. And we'll decommission the other one, get it all stripped out, all the parts taken out, and eventually get all 4 of them back in evening. But right now we have a balance, and there's some days there might be only a couple cars back there, or we have extra detail, extra part-time officers. We'll be available to drive in, squad available for an officer to take it to school, unless they want to take their personal car. So we're at a good balance. We maintain the fleet pretty well. We think it's been the same level for many years. So we step down vehicles that are still good enough, and we just will rotate an older vehicle or one, that we're not getting sucked dry on a lot of maintenance costs to it. But I don't think we really changed the number of vehicles.
It's been relatively steady. I think the important part is that with the number we have, when you're rotating them out, they're typically, historically, there are 100 to 130,000 miles on them, plus the idling engine hours, and they're starting to hit expensive repairs.
Yeah, and our numbers.
That's kind of what tells us that we're in the right number, if that makes sense. I mean, you could have fewer vehicles, you're going to put more hours and more miles on, you're just going to turn over fast.
Right. Our preference is not to drive them 24 hours straight, at least to have a 1-8-hour shift where they're not running. Sometimes it might be a 16-hour shift, so the supervisors have their own cars, and they set it up a certain way, but then everyone else shares, the patrol officer shares the rest of the vehicles, and there's typically 2 officers assigned to each of those vehicles. And we'll have 2 vehicles that are primary for the part-time officers. So the part-time officers will share all this, and other than the truck unit, there's his own vehicle.
And did we take into account the new hire, the add back for a vehicle?
Correct, yeah. So we're not adding to the fleet, just keeping the same number. So, but yes, even bringing the officer that was who retired back in 2019, we just had more part-time officers working to help offset some of those costs, or offset some of those hours.
That doesn't affect the vehicle.
to make sure that we're not replacing before we think it needs to be.
So something starts popping up.
Yeah. So we
Too often, we say,
Yeah, so as we do this, we create new tracking for every squad. So any expense that he has per squad, we can see how much it costs from the purchase all the way up to repair.
It's a family budget because, you know, they've got a good idea of how many officers are out there.
Yes.
A lot of cars.
We do. So, and then just, some of the vehicle mileages will be less than 100,000, just because of wear and tear on the vehicles and the engine power. So don't get hung up on how many miles are on this one.
No, that's not part of this.
So that's just how many hours that we are actually idling or driving. So.
How many total vehicles are in the fleet?
So there's 11 that are on the replacement schedule, and they have one step down vehicle, meaning that one's not budgeted to be replaced. It's taken one of the better of the replacement vehicles and dropped down.
Okay.
So 11 that are part of our replacement schedule.
And then just make sure everyone's clear, we also have lease vehicles for many criminal activities, and we'll take one of those vehicles and use it as a undercover vehicle or surveillance vehicle. So there's one that's not in there, but it's not part of the fleet. And then we'll rotate that vehicle. Whenever something nicer or newer comes along, we'll sell the other one. We keep upgrading, buy up or whatever it's called. So right now that's sitting in the back there too. That's without giving it up. You guys know what it is without giving it up for the public. What it is a vehicle that we utilize for undercover operations.
Okay. And then in Public Works, there are two items to replace. One is the utility truck and one is the patch trailer. There are, again, two additional expenses, which we had just discussed in the revenue section. $150,000 is in there for the fencing replacement and the $25,000 for the PW flooring. Moving on to TIF 1 for the current fiscal year. Revenues are up. This does include the $50,000 TIF 1 declaration of surplus, which in the budget we budgeted as a reduction of revenue, but the auditors after the fact came back and said you should just budget it as an expense. So that's why revenues are going to be up, the expense will be up.
Okay.
It's the same net effect, but in this budget it is budgeted as an expense as well. The two major expenditures is the surplus, but also the sanitary sewer extension study that was completed. 22 and 23, we did increase by 2%. This again does have a $50,000 surplus budgeted. Then we have $5,000 for any type of professional services needed within, and $5,000 just for legal, in case something were to come up with that. TIF 2, we did budget last year just at 1%, but it came in slightly above that. And then the expenditures in there were just the TIF audit letter and the $150,000 surplus that was declared. For next year, we did estimate 2%, which is what we've seen over the last few years. And then the expenditures in there is $80,000 for preliminary engineering costs on the utility line burial under Route 47, and then a $50,000 surplus in TIF 2. That is kind of what that TIF can sustain now. It's not growing; it doesn't grow as fast as TIF 1 has, so to sustain it, still have funds to do those projects.
But that's just an engineering expense. What do we anticipate? Or we just have no idea based on numbers that were talked about?
The number that was given to us for utility line barrel was anywhere from 600 to 700. This is just to get a number from ComEd.
And is that because the village is authorizing that and there's prevailing wage for that? Or how does that work? Because I guess I look back and I look up and say at part of our comments when we've asked them to bury the lines as part of their project, I don't think anyone anticipated that 600,000.
I don't, I mean, I'm looking at you guys, I'm not aware that there's a different cost, whether it's requested by private.
I don't
but I can't say that for certain.
Okay.
I don't believe there's a different cost from ComEd, whether it's a developer or a municipality. I don't believe there's a different price. And it's the other utilities
borrow from TIF one
Yeah,
to do that.
yeah, not as much.
The idea that's being explored, and this is the cost to really pursue it, is that Prairie Grove Commons, part of their draft agreement is to bury the overhead utilities on the property. But then when you go north of that kind of mess, there's nobody to do it. There's no pending big development. So the idea is if that's ever going to get buried to clean up the appearance in that area, the proposal would be these TIF dollars to make that happen. So I think we're talking about basically from Galena up to Park.
Yeah, that's where, I mean, it's the in front of the Walgreens and.
Yeah, at least that part.
No, not on the east side, not on the west side. It goes about Culver's. Yeah.
I mean, there's more to bury
It's just
on the
that-
south side property.
The gap between Walgreens and the.
Correct, but there's two crossings over there, so I mean, it's complicated.
Someone else, sorry.
As I say, just north of Galena to Culver's, there's two 47 crossings that would also have to be addressed, as well as that section of underneath. And then if Prairie Grove is going to bury theirs, then you'd have to get the part at Walgreens Corner under the pavement there to line up to be underground with Prairie Grove as well. So, and those are very utility-rich areas.
So tomorrow, or today, make sure you look at it, because once you see it, you can't unsee it.
You can't unsee it.
Oh, you're talking from like, oh.
Yeah.
Oh, I know, I've always wondered.
It looks like a bird's nest. Yeah, I honestly, I drove in my ignorant bliss until Brent said something to me, now I can't unsee it.
So you're welcome. It wasn't my intent. Yes, yeah. Well, that's when the landings happen.
There's like a gap between.
Yeah, they gave us, which I think we have, whatever county called like $25,000 sitting there. That was somebody, yeah, because they didn't want to do it. It was so expensive. So we, as part of one of those, I can't remember if it was the Walgreens or the landing.
And then right.
Yeah.
And then there's another 47 crossing just at the south side of Galena as well. So, yes, it's a very difficult. It looks like probably at one time when the gas station was there and the power poles were on one side, so they put a lead for that. And then when the next set of utilities needed something, they made another connection for that. And then when they wanted to go down Galena, then they just made another hop over 47 for that. Yeah, they never combined or.
And I believe it's correct that under the state regulation, ComEd has to do it at the least expensive.
Yes, that's what they say by ICC regulations. Right. They have to do it. I mean, when they install it for anybody, yeah, they have to do it the least expensive way.
To kind of go back to borrowing to tip one, I think it's too early to determine that because of the process. So it takes 6 months for them to give us a cost estimate, and then it's 18 to 24 months from that point to completion of the project.
Okay.
So we're into end of 23-24 budget, or maybe 24-25 before it's completed. So it depends.
Yeah.
Again, it's something happens in TIF 2, we're waiting if the regular account starts and we get property taxes, and now that's increased what we're getting in that TIF. So I think it's too early to determine if we're going to have to borrow from the TIF,
Okay.
but we have the ability to if that's needed.
Okay.
So that covers the TIFs, unless there's any questions more on those. So getting an infrastructure fund. So this year, we did have increases in collections for non-rural sales tax, same correlation that we had with the regular sales tax. And then grants that we had in the year were 47 in Bliss construction, and then Gordon Road corridor study, which cleared that grant out. Some additional revenue that we did have, we made a transfer from the general fund out of surplus for $50,000 to fund our portion of the Blackberry Creek Bridge. So that is in that fund for when it's needed. The expenditures for the year, They are expected to be above, again, based on the balancing of that, but we also moved ice and salt supplies into that fund that were not budgeted, so that's why we did anticipate those expenses to be over budget. Getting into next year, right now we are proposing a no increase of 6.48%, and the fee was last raised go 3 years ago in 1920. A 3% increase would raise the monthly fee about 19 cents of utility bill to an additional $7,900. Again, we are anticipating a larger increase this year, mainly due to just the sales tax alone. And then there was an increase in public improvement fees, and that's based on the law projections. Expenditures for next year. I will say all projects have dedicated funding sources, whether it's MFT, state grant funds, maintenance fees, or the sales tax. And then the scheduled projects are below, which is 38 municipals crosswalk, just the road program as a whole, whether it's engineering, and we'll get into that breakdown again. That is another section in here that we can talk about for engineering and construction. We have some money in here for bridge evaluations and engineering. The Hanford Farm topsoil support, that's a expense of the village technically, but we will be reimbursed for that. Small amount for Gordon Road median maintenance, that's being paid for still from the Settlers Bridge settlement from years ago. We still have funds enough to do that on an annual basis. Probably an additional 4 years still that we have funds that won't have to come out of those funds that are sitting there for the Gordon Road maintenance.
What's the Norris Road?
So, yeah, okay. So, Norris Road, what we've done, and I guess we can look at it too, is on page, it's P95. And what that is going to be is that road program that we presented during EEI's presentation of the road program. So what we did is we took those numbers and broke them down even further, because those were kind of just big picture numbers. So all those projects had engineering included, but in reality, engineering for a road project happens the prior year. So we broke that down even further, saying, okay, this is engineering for this road program, but it's actually next year's construction. So you'll see the funds really didn't change. It just changed when those projects were starting. So Norris Road was the SCP project that was supposed to be in the 23 road program, but you have to start engineering for that in the current. So the year prior, so this broke it down even further and actually pushed when engineering will start versus construction, phase 2-3 engineering. So that's what this is, and this will kind of be a discussion that we'll look at, because this is going to show you a 6-year plan and what it looks like for all of the funds. Now, the biggest change is since then, the first time we had all STP projects as being funded. Reality is they're not going to all be funded with the grants. So what we had to do is we thought Norris and Main Street were our two main focuses that they thought we had a better chance at getting grants for. So we left those two as having grant funding and removed the grant funding from the other two projects that were presented, which is Wheeler and Maryland. So it changed the funding sources. So it did change those years 4, 5, and 6 fund balances, because we didn't have that funding source of the SDP funds now. So nothing really has to be done by the board at this moment, but as we keep going through this, it will be a determination by the board on how we address those other 2 roads that we have as SDP. Whether it's that's our road program for the year, or we have fund balance. Since we had that revenue source kind of went away, is do we want to continue to use just annual revenues, or do we want to use some of the fund balances? And that's something the board can discuss, but we don't have to do that for a couple of years based on this current plan. So I just wanted to update it and give you kind of more specific numbers so you can see how the expenses come through, and that's where Norris is coming in, because that's a project for next year's road program that will be presented as an SDP.
Couple things. So the municipal crosswalk is 144. Will the grant, because it can be reimbursable, will the grant just show a revenue then?
So yeah, right now I have revenue of 100,000 from grant.
Okay.
For that. It's in the revenue side.
Okay.
Just to be a little cautious on those, I will say they tell you that they're reimbursable.
Okay.
Most of the time they aren't. Because when the reps give those out, they come through a specific organization, which is DCEO,
Okay.
and their grants are never reimbursable.
Okay.
So I just want to make, I know we had talked about it, but
So we need
DCEO,
clarification.
like just like Camp Dean came through and the turn lanes,
Yeah.
those were rep kind of funding,
Right.
but they came through DCO as the organization that manages them.
Okay.
And those are not reimbursable. So
Okay.
it's something to clarify because it just depends on where they're coming from the state.
So to clarify, we still get the money, it's just a question of when we get it.
We still get the money as long as we don't try to reimburse ourselves for work. So we can't start the work until we get grants.
Right.
So we can't start something
And that's not what Severson said. So I'm going to check on that.
But I would caution against that.
Yeah.
Just because that's how Camp Dean was ran in the turn lane.
Okay.
And I've dealt a lot with DCO and they're not reimbursed.
Okay.
So
What was I going to ask you next? The Blackberry Bridge pedestrian at 127. So we earmarked 50 for this year's budget.
So the actual construction majority is not going to be until 23, 24. So 77,306 of this is engineering.
Okay.
And 50,000 in construction.
Okay.
And then the majority is going to be in 23, 24.
Is this 77,000 not part of the grant funding?
It is, so it's in revenue.
Okay.
So this is just what the expenses are.
Okay.
The revenues are in the revenue
I
side
guess,
of
yeah.
grants just to match.
It's hard when you're not looking, I'm not looking at the incentive
Yeah.
side, so that's fine.
So yeah, anything that's on here, like even say for us, the school, anything we're going to get reimbursement for, this is just the expense.
Okay.
The revenue is matching on the other end.
Perfect.
That was right. Why do we have two engineering services? Line item?
HDR.
P66. From 35, that will try to.
No, we haven't left page 46 and 47 yet.
What's on looking at this?
On what page?
So they're two different departments. So if you look, 3550 is the first engineering services, that's MFT. 3553 is local. So that's why there's two, because we use MFT as a separate one for tracking.
Because you're saying that we have engineering services, and I'm looking at the first one, there's nothing.
Yeah. So MFT, we've then determined that we're just going to maximize our funds from MFT, and we just do construction out there, since our road program is always larger than how much we receive from MFT. That makes sense? Okay. So the remaining non-home rule sales tax revenues are used to pay for the debt service
Okay.
for the 2013 A bonds and snow and ice control. Anything above that is in the CIP road program as what's available for the programs out here. Next fund is just debt service that has the 2013 E bonds. Again, I know I said it, the infrastructure gets transferred from there into the debt service, and that's where it's paid out of. And those two plan to expire in 25-26 fiscal year. So that payment, the final payment, is in December of 25. So then that would free up a little over $500,000 additional, which you do see in the road program.
Okay.
As you'll see a larger increase once that falls off.
That should hopefully help with some of the SUP stuff that's not getting funded.
Yeah, I did build that in there, so it's still,
Dang it.
yeah, still not as good. I mean, we were looking at millions of dollars from STP, so it's a bigger chunk, but if you look at it, it's still pretty good for not having that. But it's just a decision. It's a decision of just some policy questions. So, Sugar Center, which is Fund 47, again, we have not levied for a few years on that, and we do anticipate that to continue for about 3 more years. years of not having to levy any taxes for that center. So
Because there's what, very
there
low
is
maintenance?
reserve.
There's
So,
reserve, but
so
very low
based on
maintenance.
how that SSA was set up, they get billed a certain amount, but the maintenance cost is much lower. So this is probably 4 years ago.
Yeah, that's the one you approved.
That's the one that was approved tonight.
Approved something like that?
Yeah, so that was the one approved tonight. So that's how the budget is based off of this 3 year. Is knowing how much is in the reserve to continue that without actually having to levy taxes for that SSA.
Oh, I see what you did there. So you've got the deduction for this year of almost 9,000, and the fund balance is actually 8 years back.
Right, so it's like projecting off of that how much we anticipate to continue to have before we need to levy. Any questions before we get to water? No? Okay. So, water fund is projected to have about $315,000 surplus for current fiscal year, and we're proposing to have a surplus of $18,000 for next year. This proposed fiscal year 22-23 does have another decrease of 3% in water rates as proposed. So just to give kind of reference, we had our utility rate committee, which is we are required to do, and their approval was 3% for every year. So this is the final year of that plan, and actually what we've done is 0.3 decrease, and then we're proposing a 3% decrease again. So, based on what the utility rate committee approved, this is a positive for them. So everything presented is with a 3% decrease. So if that changes, obviously the number also change. I always say, just if you're looking at it, about every 1% is about $40,500 in their revenue for every 1% you change.
You want to discuss that?
Is there anything we're not doing that we should do?
When Bill's done, right?
As presented,
Yeah.
we didn't cut anything out of the budget.
I think it's
Well, I
exciting.
mean, what is, I understand you're paying out, is there anything that we should be doing that we're not?
I believe that's Brett. Usually Brett's pretty good at putting everything in the meeting.
We're working through everything we can handle.
And then
Water
we're,
replacement projects and stuff.
yeah, and one of our things we're working on is a longer term outlook to start putting together the, whether it's 10, 20, 30, 40 years, replacement and that, and the back end to say, okay, if you spread that out over time, what should we revenue expense, kind of how we should spend it. Yeah, to kind of look where we're at, and then, but part of that discussion, part of it as you go through that is that whole discussion about, do you have cash on hand when something comes up, or do you issue debt? That's a policy issue in that, one school of thought is be conservative, have cash on hand before we do things, another school of thought is you use debt service to the people who benefit from it, or the ones who are paying for it, not the people who are here when the improvement wasn't in place yet.
I guess what my fear is that if we keep decreasing it every year, if we do need an increase, it might be a big increase.
Yeah, I think, yes, we had that conversation. I think we felt comfortable that that's not going to happen anytime soon, that there's enough time as we work to get more long-term information that we wouldn't come back and say, oh my gosh, we need a 10% increase. We may be back next year saying, we do have to start increasing again, but I think collectively we felt comfortable that doing another increase this year is okay.
And I will say this 3% decrease does include a $700,000 transfer as well for future infrastructure. So it already includes $700,000 for those future projects on an annual basis. So that's why I believe we did talk about that. Like,
I just, going through this budget, the last time we did the update on it and seeing all the needs that we have, and put off. I don't want to do that again. And, I don't necessarily want to raise things, but I don't want to hurt us by doing a decrease. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I think a lot of the things that were put off, though, were not things that would be funded through here.
Yeah, no, I get that too. That's why I just want to ask the question. Be sure that we're not shoot ourselves for something.
and as we go through, we'll talk about things we have added, and one of them, the big thing is we've added an actual full-time employee to this budget as well. So we did add things that needed to be done, and it's all a start. I plug a 3% in I mean, that's really how you kind of look at it, and I think having that transfer in there still, and the 3% plus adding people and doing all the projects, I think is, long term. Okay. So, and what Brett said is, it's going to be something very similar to what we have for the road. We're going to have for water just at an extended year period. It's not going to be a 5-year period. It's going to be a more planned.
I guess what's the thought process on, and I know you're concerned with math, so I know that you know these numbers inside out, but a 2% decrease over 3% is $40,000. I mean, is that significant enough, or, you know, to be even more conservative than the 3 and do it at 2? Because that's really a 5% decrease over 2 years, which is still significant.
I look at it as that on our capital projects list is trying to extend water to the north. You know, in the past, I think, sitting in the peanut gallery, you know, I've heard trying to get projects engineered so that they're ready for it. And so, but you know, if we can do stuff like that, I don't want to necessarily, like I said, I don't necessarily want to do an increase to it, just because of the decrease.
Well, let's look at this for a minute. What page is this fund on, and how far above the reserve are we?
So yeah, just to finish that same sentence. So right now it's
73. 73 it starts.
Yeah, so you'll see on there is the fund summary. So right now the projection for the end of next year is the 1.786 million. The 25% reserve policy that the village has is actually 982,000. So we're still about 770,000 above for our reserves on top of what we've been transferring. So we're still well above that 25%, even with all of these transfers being made. So I don't know if that answered.
I think this might help a little, so probably going to get to it, but might be appropriate time now. What projects are planned next, whatever the appropriate time frame, looking at this 2, 3, 4 years that you started engineering or construction?
So the main ones that we've started looking at is completing the entire Dugan Woods water main process. That whole remaining, which is broken up into 2 phases. So phase 1 is currently in engineering right now for construction completion next year. And then next year has phase 2 engineering for completion in fiscal year 23-24. In total, those are roughly $2.3 million. So, and that's funded right now, and that's where this conversation that Brad started with. Well, what's 4 years from now? What's 5 years? What's 10 years? So that we can kind of back in and make sure that we're starting to fund those things going forward. Like we have, we are currently funding the water meter replacement program, which was not in the past, which is thrown into the out, which affects your water rates. But right now we're putting money away for that 10-year program. So that's what we're working with to get to, is being able to transfer a certain amount of funds every year to make sure we're funding these ahead of time.
When do we expect the water study draft?
Probably another 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, it's a couple months out yet. They've done a lot of work on it already.
Yeah, one of the things that we talk a lot about is the extension of water up north. And, you know, as you've heard us all talk about before, a water tower up there has been on the village list for, I want to say at least 50 years, you know, if not longer, in the north of the town to serve existing residents, but also, depending upon location design, could facilitate additional growth. So one of the things we talk about is that, okay, if the village has a full or some role in that, I mean, you're several $1 million, depending upon size of that. I mean, I think we're talking anywhere from probably 3-4 million up to 7. I mean, steel prices right now are crazy and everything, but and that's where I think, you know, conversations with Matt is that 700,000 that he's showing putting away, that may be a scenario depending on time where we do some type of debt, whether it's, you know, an IEP loan loan or something, so that 700 would be to go toward building up a fund for that income. If we kind of program that in on a regular basis, that could be how we pay the debt down if we do want to do that type of improvement.
Right, and we also have, and outside of the 700,000, you have 2 EPA loans that do fall off in the next 2 years, and then an actual bond that falls off in the next 5 years. So as we're looking at this and saying we're going to transfer 700,000, you also have bonds falling off in the next few years. So regardless if you change water rates at all, you capture that reduction in expense. So for those projects that may need bonding, you have falling off debt that you could replace and have no net effect on the project. So we looked at that too for those bigger projects, whether water towers or something up north that we can fund.
I think in summary, we certainly appreciate the thought. I think right now, and kind of tying back to earlier, given what everybody's facing, being able to reduce it by 3% right now, we're not concerned that we're going to come back in the next year or two and go, oh my gosh, we made a huge mistake, we got to jack it up 5%. So we don't have that worry.
No, that's wonderful. I think everybody will appreciate that. If they're saving a little bit more next year.
Okay, so getting on the page, it's P48. So expenditures for this year are below budget, and that does include $1 million of transfers to the Water Capital Fund, which is $875,000 is for infrastructure. So $850,000 for this Dewey Woods project, $25,000 for the other half of the public works flooring, and then $125,000 which was budgeted for the water replacement program, which is an every year budget. So that's included in all of those for this year, and like I said, we're still projecting about $300,000 surplus with all of that. So revenues going forward for next year does include 3% decrease. As we're pretty much done with this new meter program, we're getting an accurate data, so we're able to get kind of better averages than we used to have. So it's helping us get good revenues and revenue projections with the meters.
That was I just noticed in here, you've got tab on fees. Those adjusted based on the permits?
Yes. Yeah. So that includes whoever is going to, because some annexation agreements they're waived. So if they have them, they're in. Yes. And like I said, the revenue is proposed to decrease about $120,000. Again, that's surely due to the 3% decrease. So expenditures, obviously, we just discussed all the COLA stuff, so that's going to flow through all of these budgets, and we'll update them, so that number will get better with those as well. So it's not going to be the 18, it'll actually increase. So then we kind of get in to each department. So administration and IS services, that was increased. 36,000, and that was the same reflection we saw in general fund due to the consultant expenses being kind of unknown at this moment for those. Insurance premiums slightly decreased to a slight decrease from IRMA. Equipment replacement is at 100% funding. And then transfer to infrastructure is a decrease of 175,000 from this year, but it's still 700,000 for next year. And then again, you see one EPA loan fall off this coming year. That just happened, so that's what that decrease is. So you'll see there's 2 more coming.
So exciting.
Next is PW Administration Salaries. That does increase the request for an additional full-time laborer within that department, so that is in this budget already, as presented. And then general equipment is increased by $25,000. There's a replacement of the gator. That, once it's purchased, will be added to the equipment replacement, so that'll just be depreciated over the useful life, so that it's funded fully. Water operations, we did add this increase in expense of $15,000 for the water tower cleaning program. This is year 1.
Is it a contract for so many years? Is it a contract that's so many years? If you're like, this is year 1, this is.
Yeah, it's typically been a 5-year, but we're gonna make it a 3-year now.
And much needed. Anybody who has seen the Presbyterian water tower, it looks horrible. so.
Yeah, last year must have just been a bad weather year because it really, got really bad.
5 years used to be a great number where it just started to show up, and then, now, obviously.
I noticed it in a different, I was somewhere recently in Illinois, traveling for kids' sports, and went by a water tower, and it was similar to ours, so I don't know if it was just last year, all of a sudden, things started to bloom, but, yeah. We're not alone, I guess.
That repair maintenance and for buildings, it decreased overall by 8,000, but it does include a replacement of a roof at Bill 7 for $9,000. Electricity did increase by 9,000, but we recently been in discussions with a company regarding possible solar, so we are looking at that possibility to reduce those costs on the well and lift stations. Sewer operations did decrease slightly from projections for the testing at Windstone not being completed. There is a slight projection. It was budgeted at 45, but we projected at 24,000 for this year, and then 20,000 going next year for the I&I for those areas.
Matt, for 6511, I'm sorry, electricity, 6511.
Water operations?
Yeah. What is the actual number now that you have a budget? Because I imagine that's all well electrical.
What is the budget?
What is the budgeted number for electricity for the year?
189.
189. And that's with this 9,000.
Yeah. Yeah, the estimated actual 180. So it went to 189.
Okay.
It's just we're anticipating without knowing any of the solars.
Yeah. Well, I just so the board knows, we did talk to a solar company, and I was always curious as to what the annual number was that we spent just to have the wells working, and it's obviously $189,000. So if they put solar on wells, what is it, what could we potentially save? So
Yeah, and these are our current electrical aggregation, but as everywhere, nothing's cheaper than ComEd anymore. So that's why we have seen an increase again, is because it used to be under aggregation where it was lower than ComEd rates, and now everything's pretty much ComEd rates. The third parties actually have been higher than ComEd. So, and then to go to water capital, the final budget, engineering increased by 47,000, and that's the remainder of the waterworks system and sanitary sewer system needs assessments are in that. Building improvements, we did add Jamie explained those things that we needed but haven't been done, and that's security and security cameras at the wells and lift stations. So that's been added at $85,000 for all of those that we haven't had. So
that's astronomical, right?
And then for equipment, for trucks, there is one truck that's a 2007 scheduled to be replaced in the water fund. And then in equipment, the sewer easement machine is scheduled to be replaced. Water system improvements, it did increase due to some maintenance at the Blackberry Creek and Hincus water main. It's like in every few years there's a larger cost for that. It's like $11,000 for everything. And then there's $80,000 to replace the 3 service pumps in Suckers Ridge.
I don't have it in front of me, and I don't know if it's appropriate to ask because I don't know what fund it's in.
Okay.
And I think it was under revenues, and it was natural gas. Okay, utility tax for natural gas.
Okay.
So I guess my question to you is, are we looking at futures for natural gas? Because obviously we had a huge spike this year in natural gas prices. And so hence the estimated actual being significantly higher than budget. It was 120 budgeted, we came in anticipated at 147. But you're bringing it back up at 150. I guess my question is just, obviously we're budgeting anticipating natural gas prices staying the same, because when you look at how it trends, right, from, and 121, or is it just we have some new growth on that number, and so that's where that number comes from?
Yeah, so what we do is we take, when we do these budgets, we take what we've collected so far, and then look back at the previous 12 months and take an average.
Okay.
previous 12 months of an average out for the remaining that we haven't received yet.
Okay.
And then just add 1%.
Okay. Thank you.
Any questions on water fund as a whole? Okay, next one is water capital fund. So this is that fund that we created to be treated just like we use Fund 34, but for the water fund. So again, as we discussed, revenues are $850 for Dugan Woods, $25,000 for the Public Works building flooring. Expenditures were just in relation to the phase 1 engineering of the phase 1 of Dugan Woods water main. And then $37,345 was for the painting of Public Works. That was funded from the prior year. For next year, they're expected to decrease roughly $125,000, and we reduced how much we're transferring for infrastructure, and then vehicle equipment replacing. That funding did increase. The expenses for next year are phase 2 and 3 of engineering for phase 1 of Dugan Woods for $983,000, and then phase 1 engineering for phase 2 of Dugan Woods at $50,000, and then $25,000 for works flooring replacement. Refuse fund, pretty standard fund. We're recommending for this year a 3% increase, which is what the contractual we are getting from DC Trash. So the current rate is going to go from $19.40 per month to $19.98 per month. So that's the only rate increase for this year that we're proposing.
And there's nothing to be done about that. So we have that was the best rate we could find, yeah.
So in here you do have police pension funding. Since they are technically a portion of the village, we have to approve a budget even though it's a separate entity. So what we have, we did increase, again, we discussed increasing the police pension contribution to the 100% EAN that Lauterbach had instead of decreasing per the state mandated. And then we also look at, if you look at the numbers, we did incorporate some of those changes that we saw with the transfer of service for the officer that was considered disabled and then came off of disability and now works at a different police station, police department. He gets a transfer of service, so that comes out of your assets and goes over to that police department. So those are all in here. They still have a good year returns, but that is all budgeted, and it also kind of early on will hopefully help the increase that we're anticipating next year because of all those changes between somebody retiring, somebody coming off disability, and the transfer of service is not in what we were given as a requirement for contributions. So we're hoping that the increase kind of just lowers that increase that we're expecting next year. So that covers all the memo. All the financials are behind it that we kind of gone through. The only other pages really are on page 95 and 96, which 95 we kind of went over, which is the road program. That's nothing that needs to necessarily be discussed unless there's specific questions on this year's items. And just to kind of give you an idea, this goes on to page 96. 96 actually is the infrastructure fund as a whole from 35 to kind of give you an idea of road infrastructure money surpluses where there's dedicated funds to. So as we kind of go through, I have updated, because this went out before I updated the end surplus. So actually, if you're looking at that anticipated unrestricted fund balance, which is the highlight in yellow, that number is actually $3,053,000 as our anticipated based on the new numbers. So this was done prior to that. So that's the number I talk about when I say that determination in 3 or 4 years on the road program. If you want it to be the road program for those STP projects, or if you want to just use some of that, that's the number I'm talking about.
Okay.
And that number is after we take out any of those restricted funds that we have. So $50,000 for Blackberry that we transferred, 19,000, that's the number for sellers that we're currently using for Gordon Road median maintenance. And then 622,000 is restricted MFT funds currently. And then that's, you'll see, part of the road program for the next year. And then the bottom part shows you projects that we anticipate that could be used for those funds. Again, Phase Lane Bridge, those numbers have changed slightly. We haven't really got confirmed numbers, but at one of the capital projects, we have $1.5 million now.
Okay.
So that changes those numbers. But even if you use those, and again, Parking 47 is on here until we get a grant document that says we have funds for it, I leave it on here because I also feel that
We
30
budgeted,
municipal too.
you budgeted bridge inspections though, in this budget.
So those are in there too. Bridge engineering, some stuff's in there. So those are in the budget. But I just to give you an idea that we still have the funds if needed, but those numbers now do change with the $1.5 million number rather than $2.275 million that we have. It's kind of more information than.
No, it's great. I think it's fabulous.
If there are further questions as you go through those, feel free to reach out because I know it's a lot.
Yeah.
I do have a question. Yes. IS service. Why is that going up so much?
So we have gotten notification that Jeremy is resigning. And we are unsure what that's going to look like future for us. And we believe based on the past year or two, that it may not be a one-man organization that we need, like one person. So it may be going to a larger company that may have a different agreement that we have right now. We don't pay them off flat. A lot of new contracts with IT services is very similar to a retainer. We pay you $3,000 a month. So we are unsure what that number is going to be, but we do know that what he charges us is not necessarily everything that he does for us. And so without knowing that number and knowing how many hours extra he does for us, we put in an additional $50,000 split between water and general fund just to have it there, knowing where we were with our budgets. But that's why we're going to have to go out and find.
When you say resigning, is he employed?
No, he just took notice, gave us notice that he would kind of go through us and help us get the next step, but
yeah, he was very good in saying that he would not leave us high and dry, and he's actually willing to work with us to put together an RFP.
I'm not thinking about it. When we settle the bill, we've got to put it on.
We'll have to address that.
I mean, we have to increase the budget actually for internet that's coming through that building because he purchases it for us, I guess, and then we pay him. So we have addressed that in the budget as well. Of probably an increase for internet from us because it's not split by anybody. So
Yeah, Tony, he's got some sort of power out there.
yeah, I guess we'll have to.
Yeah,
I'm sure they're working on it.
It's going to increase the cost of production a bit anyway, because we are grandfathered into apparently a suite deal. So when we sell the building, we will lose that connection.
So that's why there's an increase. It's just kind of an unknown number.
Right.
But in total, so what it did was in total took how much we have budgeted for an IT consultant to $90,000, which we don't anticipate it being that much, but
Yeah.
to have it in the budget during this process of changing things over, we know.
Does anyone have any additional questions as we go through the other funds? No?
Know your numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah, doesn't read it.
Mike, do you have any questions for Matt or staff?
No, nothing here.
Okay, thank you. I know.
So Matt, would you anticipate which meeting, next meeting approval, 2 meetings? What's left budget-wise? I mean, it sounds to me like there's nothing coming out of this that you have to, I mean, you have to clean some things up.
Yeah, so out of this is just going to be updating COLA, and then it'll be to determine results It doesn't have to be.
When does it have to be filed?
I have to have it to the county by the end of April.
So
So
there's
generally,
no rush, so it gives us the more time to mull that through the budget, if they see anything.
yeah, generally, we have to have a third meeting and then approve it the fourth, but again, this, usually there's changes, but this one doesn't really have many. But the next meeting can be, here's the budget, and
Yeah.
not last chance, but
Right.
last minute changes as you get to that point to approve it. So it probably will not be on for approval at the May 5th or March 15th, probably be an approval at April.
I think that's fine. I think that gives the board the month of March. So any questions you find or something you see that you have a question about, ask Matt. And anything that the board brings up that is subsequently changed.
Yeah, it will be in the memo. So anything that changes between now and the next meeting will be in the memo as changes. So whether that's from the board or something that we get new information on, will be highlighted as they were in this memo to the board on any changes.
Excellent. Thank you. It's a lot of work, I know. And thank all department heads, because I know it's a long process to get through it. And some board members have a wish list, and we want to make sure they get done. So, all right. Okay, we're really cruising tonight, folks. Let's get right to it. Up next, we have reports. We have staff reports. Rent.
Yes, just a couple quick things. Two Metro West related. They did have their annual legislative breakfast on Monday morning at 7, so everybody wanted to kick off the elimination of the mandate. So it was kind of weird, quite honestly, being in a room with 50 people and no one wearing masks after however long, with masking everywhere you go. But it was a good meeting. I did get the opportunity to speak with Senator Syverson, Representative Kiker, who are the ones giving us the grant for the crossing here, so I was able to thank them both personally, as well as remind them that we have further needs that our mayor has already shared with them, but every opportunity keep it in front of them. And then the other thing, which is I did forward to an email to the board from the last day or two, just want to point out that on March 10th, Metro West will have its first in-person regular monthly meeting in a long time, and it happens to be at Fireside. So normally that's attended by mayors and administrators, but trustees are welcome, and in particular, this might, if you're available, 6 o'clock in the evening, it is a dinner meeting. But if any of the trustees are interested in going, please let me know tonight or tomorrow, because obviously they have to give Fireside a final count. So if you can't make it, that's fine, but it is something. What you typically will probably have is, I'm not sure it's the first one back, 25, 30 people in total, basically from a lot of our surrounding communities, mayors and administrators, and then it starts with kind of like registration hour. Everybody's gonna chit chat, which is in many ways the best part of it, and then the formal business meeting happens over dinner. So again, just let me know if you can make that. And that would be everything.
Excellent. Any questions? Okay. Walter?
I don't have anything to add to my report from my packet.
All right. Does anybody have any questions on his board report? No? I'm surprised at your detail, unless I'm missing it in it. No. You usually have all sorts of graphs and stuff.
Does he really?
I don't know, Walter. Usually we're looking at more detail right now. Thank you. I know you've been busy. It's a lot of stuff going on.
He printed them out on 3x4 feet paper. They just looked at
He plotted them.
They're hanging outside the Public Works building.
That's perfect. Awesome. All right, Tony.
Put them up at the bottom real quick, dirt splashing them.
There you go. That's what they're being used for.
I don't have anything else to add.
Anything you need?
So I have a question.
Yeah, please.
Part 47, what's going on with that?
We submitted a response to IDOT. They sent us that it was not warranted, but make some additional report and answer some questions. So that's been submitted, so we're waiting on another response from IDOT.
Timing,
Based
on past history?
6 months.
I guess.
Yeah, they actually told somebody to quit, to even stop calling them to ask when something might be ready. They said
It
basically.
wasn't us, right?
No.
Oh God, I was like, shoot, really ticked them off.
No, right. So yeah, they said even though it's been 3, 4, 5 months, not to call and ask for status, it'll be ready when it's ready.
And then EPI gave us some new numbers for this crosswalk here. Are they gonna tell us what their ideas are, and plan on putting up, anything like that?
We're waiting for a response from IDOT as our preliminary plan that we've put together and submitted.
Can I get a copy of that?
Sure.
Okay, I appreciate it. I have a concern about safety.
No,
That's why I'd like to see.
100%.
Just a similar question, is IDOT on the same schedule with any development that would ever happen at 47 and 88? 47 needs some additional lanes or turn lanes. Is that still on the, there's no like fast track or anything? Yeah, okay.
No, I know with my industry.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, seriously, we're really at the mercy of IDOT with our intersecting roads of 47 and 30.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like everything we want to do is an IDOT.
And we're still waiting on the Prairie Grove access,
Right.
right in, right out on IDOT.
Yeah. So you should get a little recorder so that when you ask you can just hit it and say, we'll wait on an IDOT. You know,
Yeah,
relieve
just
yourself. Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Tony. Brad, do you have anything to add?
I do not.
Okay, thank you. Now,
I do have a couple things. Update on part-time utility billing clerk. As of today, it sounds like a big number, but we posted it on Indeed. We have 113 applicants, but it is posted on Indeed. I will preface that, meaning it's a one-click for somebody to apply for a job, so we get a lot. So we're in the process of going through that. Myself and Brett are going through that, and no, not Brett. And we plan to kind of try to start scheduling stuff on Friday to start scheduling some interviews, and we're kind of meeting that now.
Hey, if you find like 2 that you can't decide on, send one of them my way.
Give them a hint. With police pension fund consolidation, it isn't here, but we were notified, actually formally notified on the 25th. I know we got notice by phone, I think, on the 23rd that the consolidation for March 1st is not happening. It's now pushed to June 1st. There's some forms that have to be filled out that they're requesting for information changing and transfer of assets. So that's where we're at right now with consolidation. The last is kind of a little bit more into the investment committee meeting that myself and Jen and Brett did with PMA, and the discussion really focused around how much additional funds can be sent over to them to invest. So we did determine that the additional funds that we have transferred the last 2 years for Village Hall are going to be sent over to PMA to invest, knowing the timeline of a new Village Hall is still a couple years away, but to have those funds invested in making some whatever interest we can get on it, it's a bunch, but so at the end of April we will be transferring about $1.3 million to PMA. That's from the last 2 fiscal years, and then at the end of next year we'll transfer another $700, which is in the budget as presented. So that's additional funds, so that'll get total investments from the village to just under $7 million with PMA for actual investment power. So the Village Hall funds, though, will be a segregated account. They won't be just lumped together with everything else. So those will be segregated so we can see how much funds. Those will been locked up for about 2.5 years, until about November of 24 is when we anticipated. Doesn't mean that if something magical happens, we have the funds that we can get, because every 6 months we have about $700,000 maturing every 6 months. So we're in a ladder schedule of about 6-month periods between April and May, and then November, December we have $700,000 maturing. So we wrap that around bond schedules just in case property taxes don't come through. So that's how we ladder those. So we have the ability to get money if needed, if something were to change for a village hall, but we did anticipate locking that up for about 2.5 years for village hall funds. And then discussing the non-cash that we've left with them because interest rates were so bad. We left it in the cash money market account because it was getting a better return. So there's about 2.7 in cash that we did. Now that rates have started to shift again a little bit into the 1s and 1.5s, to take that down and have $600,000 on hand and reinvest $2 million again. So it's still going to be in that same schedule, that same 6-month ladder schedule, but it'll just be further out. So we're locked up with funds through about 3 years now. So it was
And there's still cash reserves at the bank.
yeah, so that's just investment
Right.
cash reserves. I mean, we still have we have cash reserves at the bank locally too. This is just more money we can put away that is, again, we talked, it's the $2 million that we have for equipment replacement, but in reality, when do you need $2 million every year to replace? It's not needed. So we kind of lock it up because we're in a revolving cycle of funding versus spending. So.
Matt, just to clarify, as I see Chief's eyes getting big over there, these are, when you say cash, it doesn't mean it's cash that is assigned for a specific purpose.
Correct.
I'm picking on you, Pat. Whoa, we got all this money?
So it was a good investment meeting because we haven't had one where we've been able to give more money or talk about investments and actually raise returns. That's it. All I have.
Excellent. Chief.
So I know we're ready for some of the thunder out, but for the cars will be going up over the next month and a half on our outfitter, and we'll be selling 3 of the vehicles. So just a reminder, 5 vehicles was total, so that's the 4th one is the replacement for the total vehicle. So did the math for the vehicles that we got. For the 6 of the vehicles are assigned to patrol, the other 6 are assigned to individuals based on their specialties, but 2.33 officers drive each one of those cars. So not 3, but on average. So we do use them, and then the other ones last longer. So a couple of really good news on staffing for the police department. Both candidates passed their psychological assessment, so they're ready to continue to move forward. They're going through their medical phase. You typically don't anticipate anything hanging it up at that point. Heather's going to start the transition academy as an 80-hour class. It starts next week. That's next week. So on Monday she'll be traveling, or Sunday night she'll be traveling down to the St. Louis area. Spending back and forth on the weekends for 2 weeks there, and then she'll come back. And the second candidate that we have, should take that notice that we made a spot for us at the academy. So we got past some of the weight, we got past some of the things. However, knowing that typically is something that I would always like to do, and have your input and involvement and you available, is we typically would look at coffee again, not what we do for promotion, but we do for new officers. I know our next board meeting happens when Heather's down in SWIC, which is the Southwestern University. I don't know any college, thank you. But so I may have to push it to the following board meeting, if that's okay. But then at the same time, the other candidate starts March 28th, but you can come in for a board meeting because it's going to be in Celia, which is college page. So if it's okay, I'd like to present both officers for a ceremonial swearing.
village clerk for their position, which is required before they start attending the things. Heather's already sworn in as an officer who's going to do it officially for a full-time officer. So, start for first meeting in April, and they have a copy if it's okay with everybody. We're welcome.
Yeah.
We'll do it. I know the last thing at 5 o'clock. Sure, we're listening.
So that's the 5th. Yeah.
What was it, 5? I don't know what time.
I think it was for his family and friends, it was 5 to 5:30 or so, wasn't it? And then the swearing in and everything happened at 5:30.
And then 5:45 we got the room back.
Yeah.
So say 5:30?
No, 5 o'clock. Start the
5
meeting.
o'clock, yeah.
The actual swearing in at 5:30, clear out at 5:45, get ready for the meeting.
Perfect.
I think it'll be ceremonious.
Read it as we speak. Perfect, that's great. That's great news, Chief.
So,
I hope, yeah, we're excited. Hopefully they are too, you know, and the new officer to Sugar Girl and hopefully excited to join this family. Any other questions for Chief? No? Okay. Thanks, Chief. Okay, I don't think I missed anyone. Let me start with trustee reports, and I'll go to Mike Shomas. Trustee Shomas, you're up.
Yeah, I have nothing.
Ah, that's fine. All right.
I know.
That's I know.
Oh, that's maybe now, so, nothing.
Okay, thank you. Heidi? Okay, thank you. Trustee White, thank you. Trustee Walter?
I had another form boil meeting. It was kind of a short one, mainly focused on food, and they all really like the food truck idea. So, a lot of the food vendors that you normally see aren't coming back, either went out of business or sold the business, things like that. So, they're looking at bringing more food options. If food trucks come in, they'd have to be permanently there for the whole weekend, they can't leave. So
Okay.
that's the only thing. There's kind of large fee to plug into their electrical generators and all that kind of stuff. So, anyways, they're looking to change up the food stuff a bit, which would be exciting.
So they definitely have a farm will?
Yeah.
Sponsorships are for sale.
Yeah, there'll be a jumbotron there, so we can put your mug on there. And big donors back.
Wouldn't be the first time.
Okay, can you
But,
updated on the parade? I know it's got so much.
Yep, I have not heard anything about the parade yet. So.
Hopefully there's a little bit of effort put into the parade. And not that there hasn't been in the past. I know that sounds terrible. But I have been to Port Royal meetings where some neighboring communities do a phenomenal job. And their setup is different than ours. But it just seems like the path that they take is not highly, there's not a lot of traffic, if you will. So where most of the traffic is where it ends, where you have people congregating. So I don't know if there's a better move that they can do, or more involvement maybe. I know we just have the fire protection district, but when you look up at Elmer, there's a multitude of different fire protection districts that come through a parade, so maybe we can build a parade a little bit.
Yeah, shut down Sugar Grove Parkway.
Shut her down. They shut down 47 in Elmer.
Yeah.
Just shut her down. Parade right through town. Chief, go.
And they did, I believe they're required to submit kind of an event planning, especially safe. I know they've talked with the police department and just make sure that they have certain direct access to the stage for any emergencies and things like that. So I think that's something that someone is going to reach out to you, or maybe already has.
Not yet.
Okay.
We've been.
I don't know if there's anything I can do.
No, and I don't want to put a number on it, but I think in today's, in light of today's activities that are taking across the country, vehicle ramming, and different protocols put in place, having vehicles getting in and around people nowadays, we really need to do a better job of looking at it. Could it happen? Yes. Do we think we'll
what happened, hopefully not, but we gotta plan for it, make sure that we have all the measures in place, and that could be costly. And that could be, changing up how things are moving forward, and it's just the right location for this event. When we do it, vehicles constantly pulling in for the food area, we have vehicles pulling in for the stage, we have vehicles for the car show, and, and the craft fair, and it's just someone accidentally puts their foot on the wrong pedal, or you can have, a major event that we don't want, brought to Sugar Grove. So
Someone deliberately puts their foot.
and in addition to the random vehicles, is obviously on the mind of a lot of us, especially if it would happen in Wisconsin at their parade too. So and other events too. But so we're going to have some discussions and maybe look at other measures that could be put in place. So just
Should I look forward to more?
yeah.
So, Pat, are you basically saying whoever's leading that for Cornwall should try to contact you sooner rather than later?
Correct. Yes, please.
Okay, very good.
Thank you, Ryan. Anything additional to share? Chief, did you have something to add? I'm sorry.
No, just again, parades now, so it's unfortunate we have to mitigate putting larger vehicles on the corners. Because, as a parade march is down, there are other barricades. But before we would just put an officer and maybe they had their car was on it, and that's why blocking traffic. So these are the techniques and the security measures that need to be looked at. So it may not have to look and feel anymore. We'll have it on a now perimeter route, but then someone can get their driveway and get in the perimeter without us being a secure area. So we need to look at all this for the safety of the citizens and for the city.
Thank you. Yeah? Excellent. I don't have a lot other than obviously Brent touched up on Metro West on the 10th. Brent and I are driving down to Springfield on the Wednesday the 26th.
Sure.
I think.
I don't know the date. But yes.
23rd. Thank you, Allison. So, and we'll work on scheduling meetings when we're down there, and hopefully soliciting more dollars that will be on our priority list. So other than that, meetings continue. We met with DEI today, just on not only the property that they represent here in Waubonsee, but just all kind of projects in Sugar Grove, and trying to keep everybody interested while the comp plan is moving forward, while we're hopefully hiring an economic developer and trying to share that news without having that news. Something's coming, hopefully, with brokers out there and end users and developers. So it's an exciting time. There's a lot of positive happening in Sugar Grove. It's Polski Day, so I don't know if anybody got their Polish Fat Tuesday donut, if you will. If not, I don't have any. I only have Girl Scout cookies. But yeah, I wish you all a good week, good couple weeks, and we'll see you back actually in 3 weeks. So we do have a need to go into closed session this evening, but I was going to ask staff or ask the board really. We're coming back tomorrow. Can we lump it in tomorrow? It won't take long. We're going in. Is everybody coming? Anybody not coming? Well, he won't be on the call anyway.
Just curious how long
It's
is
hard.
this meeting?
How long do you think?
I would guess an hour.
Yeah. No, God, no.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
We anticipate more of an open conversation.
Yeah.
Except for it. No.
You still want us to be, pick the place.
Yeah, right.
You don't want to scare them.
6 tomorrow. Mike?
Yeah, I still don't think I'm going to do much of a shape tomorrow, but I want to be
Okay. Well, I totally understood and appreciate you actually keeping the rest of us safe from whatever you have got going on. We wish you well and hopefully a speedy recovery. So with that being said,
I will be happy to have a follow-up discussion afterwards.
Perfect. That sounds great.
smaller legal.
Sounds great.
Okay, motion to adjourn.
Got a motion to adjourn? Can I get a second? I got a second on the trustee Bonnie. Roll call, Allison.
Trustee White? Trustee Bonnie?
Be careful.
Yes.
I'm waiting.
Trustee Walter?
Aye.
Trustee Lundy? Aye. Trustee Shomers?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.
I always lose that.
Good night.